Hero of the Otherworldly Castle. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 351, Resurgence. Your Majesty, good news. A guard rushed into Parker's room, panting, and excitedly shouted to Parker, who was frowning in the room. Hey, what's the good news? Did Buck think of a way to increase taxes, or did Bert find another group of refugees to let my land be cultivated? Parker looked up at the guards, who were extremely excited. These guards had been reporting every little thing to him as a great thing recently. No, it's not. The guard waved his hands and said, this time it's really good news. Zaire has withdrawn its troops from Nanshan City and announced that Zaire will no longer care about irrelevant matters. Now Zaire's troops have withdrawn. Really? Parker stood up immediately after hearing this, a little bit unbelievable. When he was about to say something, he seemed to have thought of something and sat down again dejectedly, sighed again, and said, go and call Buck. When the guard went to find Buck with doubts, Parker was thinking that, even if this news was true, he would not have enough strength to counterattack because he did not have enough food. Parker is now in the former capital of Baxter City, but now it has been renamed Dangshank City. This name is a free translation. If it is directly translated, it means a city that looks like the sun rising in the morning. Maybe Parker changed the name of his new capital to this name to tell others that he, Parker, has never given up on making a comeback and he will become glorious again. However, the reality gave him a big blow, that is, in the former Baxter country that had gone through a series of wars. There were not many civilians for him to command. No civilians meant no one to farm, no one to do business, which meant that he had no food and taxes, and Parker could not recruit troops. Even if there were hundreds of thousands of troops that were originally suppressed here, Parker now had little food to feed them, but he did not dare to disband the army just like that, because Zaire Kingdom and those who betrayed him still needed him to be vigilant, not to mention that he wanted to fight back with these troops. Not only did Parker want to fight back, but the so-called rebellious forces were also worried that Parker would fight back and wanted to completely eliminate him. It was precisely because he still had so many troops and Zaire Kingdom's retreat that perhaps the second blockbuster was already being staged. If Buck hadn't suggested to him to use ordinary troops to farm directly and let the troops feed themselves, he wouldn't even know what to do. Perhaps disbanding the army and retaining only a part of the most core and elite troops would be the best solution. While Parker was still thinking about the current situation, Buck came in. Your Majesty, I heard that the Zaire army has withdrawn and is no longer meddling in other people's business. Yes, you are here. Buck, please sit down. Parker asked Buck to sit opposite him and asked, do you have any good ideas? This is a good thing, Your Majesty. Buck didn't even think about it and said directly, aren't we worried about the lack of civilians now? Now is a very good opportunity. Oh, what opportunity? Tell me. After this incident, Parker attached great importance to Buck's opinions, even to the point that he would discuss everything with Buck before making a decision. Buck said, Your Majesty, most of our land now belongs to the former Baxter country. First, we went through the war of conquest by the Zaire country, plundering a large number of young and strong people. Later, we were occupied by our country of Philomet. After so many wars, more than half of the civilians living there have disappeared. Your Majesty knows this, otherwise you wouldn't have proposed that the army grow crops to feed themselves. What does that have to do with the opportunity you mentioned? Parker frowned and looked a little impatient when he heard this. He thought that Buck was asking for credit from him. Buck seemed to see Parker's impatience and immediately replied, Your Majesty, while we still have some food and grass, we should take the lead in sending troops and launching a war to quell the rebellion. As long as we quickly solve those traitors, the problems we are facing now will not be a problem. I see. Hearing this, Parker relaxed his brows, and suddenly he seemed to be full of energy, and he didn't look as decadent as he was just now. In the past, in order to suppress this newly occupied land full of refugees and bandits, Parker had sent nearly 200,000 troops here to suppress bandits and collect refugees. The corresponding food and grass would not be less. If it weren't for the accumulation of digestion and development over the years, he couldn't afford so many troops. In the past, Parker prepared to use the remaining food and grass that were shipped in advance for emergency use, but now it seems that these food and grass have a better use. Maybe in a while, this batch of food and grass will be used at some point. At that time, even if Parker has a good opportunity given by God, he will only have strength in mind but not energy. It's no wonder that Buck said that now is a good opportunity. Now that he knew, Parker did not hesitate and immediately ordered, "Let K. Parker gather the troops and come back immediately, and don't worry about the bandits all over the mountains." Parker's full name is Lanny Parker, and K. Parker is his eldest son. After Parker gave up Parlant and died for him in Nanshan City, K took over the position of Knight Commander of the Kingdom of Free Might and is now leading the most elite knights of the Kingdom of Free Might to suppress bandits. 3 days later, K came to see Parker. As soon as he returned, he hadn't even taken off his armor yet, which showed K's anxiety. "K, don't disappoint your father's expectations when you go out to suppress the rebellion this time," Parker said earnestly. "Also pay attention to safety. You will inherit the Kingdom of Free Might in the future. Don't worry, father, I will definitely bring the heads of those traitors back to see you," K promised, looking at his confident look, as if he had already grasped the victory of this war. When K heard that Parker asked him to lead the army to the battle, he was very happy. He had been waiting for this day to come, so that he could do something big and show his father, the monarch, that his ability was no worse than that of the deceased Parlant. In less than a day, K set out with 150,000 troops, following the route of his previous escape to the east, and launching a new westward expedition, pressing towards the still chaotic independent forces. Chapter 350 To the Last Resistance. When Andre learned that the 150,000 troops of the Free Might Kingdom were on their way, he sighed. "I didn't expect the Free Might Kingdom to launch an attack so soon. Alas, what can I do?" It's no wonder that Andre was so helpless. He has been recruiting soldiers non-stop since he became independent. After nearly a month, he has only increased his army by more than 10,000 troops, and they are all untrained recruits. In addition to his original confidant army, when he became independent, there are less than 20,000 troops. Even so, he is still one of the stronger ones among all the independent forces. Some of the other weaker forces even have only 1 or 2,000 militiamen guarding the town. Even if all the armies of the independent forces are united, they are still far from the number of 100,000. Moreover, even if the united forces gather 15 armies, these rabble alone will definitely not be able to defeat the Free Might Kingdom. But he was unwilling to surrender like this. No, in the words of the Zaya Kingdom, it should be called a vassal. Anyway, that's the meaning. But he was also unwilling. Although he had more autonomy as a vassal of Zaya State than submitting to the Kingdom of Philomet, and Zaya State did not make many demands on them at that time, only stipulating diplomacy, military affairs, tribute, reign title, and accession to the throne, Andre still did not want someone to control him. Oh, if there were only benefits. Andre shook his head, as if he wanted to shake out all the troubles in his mind. Back to the urgent matter at hand, Andre ordered the guards, "Send a message to other lords, saying that the attack of the Kingdom of Philomet needs to be discussed." 5 days later, the army of the Kingdom of Philomet had arrived at the eastern front. The officers and soldiers guarding here had long known that a large army was coming to attack. Although they had been prepared for a long time, after the formal battle, the situation was completely one-sided. "Sir Knight, there are too many enemy troops, and they can no longer be stopped. The troops of other territories are starting to flee. Let's go quickly," a knight guard reported to a knight of the coalition with sweat all over his head. The knight looked at the fleeing army, and then at the endless black mass of the Free Might army in front of him. Without saying a word, he turned his horse around and ran away while shouting, "Retreat." In Nanshan City, all the original independent lords gathered in the castle hall again to discuss the attack of Free Might. For Nanshan City, the former capital of Free Might, these independent lords all wanted to take it for themselves, but no one claimed it first or actually occupied it, so they all tacitly regarded this city and the surrounding land as public areas. It is precisely because this is a public area that no one cares about it. The fate of the civilians here can be imagined. The dignitaries of each territory played all kinds of tricks on this small piece of land during this short period of time. Under various contradictions, if it were not for the threat of free might, these people would have fought long ago, let alone gathered together in a friendly manner like now. Seeing the noise in the meeting hall, Andre could not help but shout angrily, "Stop arguing. The kingdom of Philomet is about to attack us. What's the point of you still arguing here? Can the kingdom of Philomet withdraw its troops? Then what do you think we can do? Yes, you Andre do have a solution? If you Andre have a solution, just tell us." The meeting hall was briefly silent because of Andre's shouting, but then everyone pointed their fingers at him. Who made him the first to speak out at this time? "If you want to talk about solutions, this lord really has one." Andre shouted again, and everyone in the hall looked at him in surprise and curiosity. They stopped making noise and waited for his next words. Andre looked around at everyone present with satisfaction, and then said, "The solution is that all of us send out all our troops to fight with the kingdom of Philomet." TSK, what did I think that was? If we can win, you still need to tell me. That's right, we all know that all our territories combined do not have 150,000 troops, so how can we fight? We are not the Zaire kingdom, where the army can fight 10 to 1. How can we win? Andre saw that everyone opposed it, and he was a little anxious, and retorted loudly, "Then what do you say? Are you willing to be a vassal of the Zaire kingdom, or do you want to die after living for too long?" As soon as he said this, everyone present was silent, because they had nothing to say, and Andre's words hit the point, and their current situation is really like this, and there is no other choice. Although there is no illusion of lips and teeth are cold in this world, everyone still knows this truth. So at this time, no one said that my territory is in the back, and it doesn't bother me. Finally, after another discussion, they finally reached a decision. They decided that all the territories would use all their strength and give it a try. If they failed, they would die. However, lords like Andre, who were on the front line, secretly made two preparations. If they still couldn't stop at this time, they would find Zaire state and be willing to become a vassal. Moreover, there was another advantage of being a vassal of Zaire state, that is, they could attack the surrounding forces with confidence, and they would not be opposed by Zaire state if they claimed to be the king and established a country, and they might even get support. Half a month later, outside Nanshan City, more than 100,000 troops of the Philomet state were approaching the city, and inside and outside the city were more than 110,000 troops of the coalition forces. Nanshan City became the place to decide the fate of both sides this time. Since the coalition forces knew that they could not defeat the Philomet army in a head-on confrontation, they would of course find a way. Since the head-on confrontation didn't work, they would defend themselves. Holding the city was the best way they could think of. Nanshan City was chosen as the battlefield. On the one hand, Nanshan City was the strongest and had the most complete defense facilities in the coalition. On the other hand, Nanshan City was a no man's land and no one would feel bad, even if it was destroyed. However, even Nanshan City could not accommodate more than 100,000 troops, not to mention the corresponding supplies and materials, and the maximum deployment of troops, so the entire battlefield was divided into two parts. One part was composed of 50,000 troops defending Nanshan City, and the other part was the remaining tens of thousands of troops setting up a camp a few kilometers south of Nanshan City. The two sides took care of each other and responded to the attack of the Philomet kingdom. However, because it was a coalition, the various forces were unwilling to submit to each other, and there was no unified command at all. They were all commanded by the 7 territories with the most troops. In fact, except for these 7 territories, the troops sent by the remaining territories were only better than nothing, which was why the 7 territories had command power. But it was precisely because of the 7 territories that the outcome of this war was determined from the beginning. After all, it was a fantasy for an army that could not work together to win the war. This was just an unwilling gamble by the lords of these independent territories. Sure enough, when the army of the Philomet kingdom launched an attack on Nanshan City, the commanders of several parties in the camp outside the city argued over whether they needed to send troops to support Nanshan City. When they finally decided to send troops for support, they missed the opportunity. When the coalition forces outside the city arrived, they happened to encounter the well-prepared Philimid Kingdom army and suffered a head-on blow. In this day's battle, the coalition forces lost a large number of troops both inside and outside the city. Before the war, the coalition forces had little chance of winning, but it was not completely impossible. At this point, it was obvious, and the morale of the coalition forces, which was not high to begin with, has plummeted. On the contrary, the morale of the Philimid National Army was high, and everyone was looking forward to the battle in the future. Chapter 353, The Vassal State has been established. Your Majesty, as expected, the Philimid Kingdom could not help but send troops. After receiving the news, Lurk's too as expected showed his excitement at the moment. Isn't this just right? Yang Song felt that it was natural to hear the news. He smiled and said, the plan can proceed so smoothly. Thank you for your planning and hard work, Your Majesty. Lurk bowed and said, this is what we should do. Your Majesty treats us so well. We will do our best. That's very good. Yang Song encouraged Lurk and stopped being polite. He asked directly, in your opinion, how long will those forces outside the pass endure? Lurk knew that Yang Song was asking about how long it would take for the forces outside the pass to take the initiative, to contact and show their allegiance. He thought about it carefully and replied, Your Majesty, in my opinion, it will not exceed a month at most. In fact, the forces outside the pass did not hold out for half a month. The two sides fought in Nanshan City for less than 10 days, and some people on the allied side could not hold out. In Nanshan City, Andre, like other lords, handed over the army to his knight commander and quietly waited for news, looking forward to the news of victory. However, since the war, none of the news that came every day was good news. All of them were stalemate, heavy losses, request for support. Even if there was good news, Andre would not have such an idea, the idea of asking for help from Xiago, because once he asked for help from Xiago, it meant that he would surrender to Xiago. After so many days of thinking and communicating with other lords, Andre also figured it out. Everything now is a conspiracy of Xiago. Xiago first sent troops to attack Philimid, and then sent people to incite them to betray Philimid, and then immediately ignored it and threw out a vassal. Finally, the news was deliberately passed to Philimid to let Philimid attack them. Because of their rebellion, Parker fled in panic, which made Parker hate them, so they had no way to surrender, and could only bear the attack of Philimid. This is simply a plan to wipe out the entire family. Although Andre didn't know this name, he knew that he didn't want to die yet. Therefore, he had no choice but to submit to the Xia Kingdom and become a vassal. Oh, what's wrong with the brains of these Xia people? Andre sighed and ordered a guard he trusted, go to the south and find the Xia people and tell them that I, Andre, am willing to submit to the Xia Kingdom and be a vassal. I also ask the respected Xia Kingdom to send troops to rescue as soon as possible. After that, Andre repeatedly emphasized to the guard, remember to be humble, don't offend the Xia people. By the way, take all these Xia coins with you, don't feel bad, use them when necessary. Yes, I obey your command. The guard took a stack of banknotes from Andre's hand and replied respectfully, my lord, please rest assured, I know what to do. That's good. After Andre waved his hand to let the guard go down, he walked to the window, looked at the black smoke rising from the direction of the city wall, and said to himself, I hope it's not too late. I hope the Xia Kingdom can keep its promise. I hope. The rest of the words could not be heard clearly, and even Andre himself didn't know what he said at the end. When the guard sent by Andre arrived at Penguin City and explained his purpose to the Xia army stationed there, they arrived at Gihua City smoothly. As expected, the important officials of Xia did not come to meet him at all. Instead, they ranged the guards in the inn and ignored them. 2 days later, the guard finally understood why Xia did not meet him. It turned out that other territories also sent people. Although the guards did not find out the purpose of these people, they knew that most of them had the same purpose as him. This day was the 3rd day after Andre's guards arrived in Gihua City, and they finally received the notice from Xia to meet him. Including the time on the road, he had been away from Nanshan City for 5 days. He didn't know whether Nanshan City could still be defended, and he didn't know how Zaya would treat him. Amid the guards' worries and trepidation, they walked into the governor's mansion in the center of Gihua City with the other people. They were greeted by a sturdy man with a mustache and a goatee. The natives were no longer surprised by the mustache, goatee, long hair, and crowns that were unique to the Zaya people. Chenping and Zhao Yi sat at the top and asked the 7 people who came to stand in the middle of the hall without asking them to sit down. Chenping pretended not to know and said in the native language, "Everyone, please tell me your purpose." The guard sent by Andre said first, "Dear to Zaya people, I'm sent by Lord Andre, and I'm here to ask for help on behalf of the Lord." "Me too, I'm here on behalf of." Then the other 6 people also said their purpose in a similar way. All of them came to ask Zaya to send troops for support. "I see." After Chenping and the other 7 people finished speaking, he said slowly, "I already know the purpose of your visit, and I think you all know that our country has said before that it will not intervene in matters that are not related to our country." Seeing that the Zaya people were determined to do so, the guards had to tell the truth. "Our Lord knows about the Zaya country, so this time I am here on behalf of the Lord, to submit to the Zaya country, and be willing to be a vassal. We hope that the powerful Zaya country will send troops as soon as possible. Nanshan City can't hold on any longer. Yes, our Lord is also willing to be a vassal of the Zaya country. Nanshan City really can't hold on any longer. Please ask the Zaya country to send troops to rescue it quickly. It will be too late." When Chenping heard what these people said, he knew that these people had no negotiation experience at all. How could they tell everything just by being provoked? Isn't this putting their necks under the other party's knife? So Chenping smiled slightly and said seriously, "In this case, you will sign this attached statement, and after the rescue of your country is completed, the vassal ceremony will be officially held." After the 7 people signed their names on behalf of their lords, Chenping immediately passed the news to Yang Song, who was far away in Qianqi City. After Yang Song got what he wanted, he immediately ordered Li Jing, who had been in the front, to lead 3 brigades to rescue the territory outside the pass. In this world, the attitude of Zaya State, or Yang Song, is completely different from those of the previous dynasties. That is, the attitude towards vassal states is completely different. Because of their own strength and the limitations of the times, the previous dynasties of China said to the weak countries around them, "The king does not rule the barbarians, and those who come are not rejected, and those who leave are not chased." The so-called tribute is just a superficial appearance. In fact, the vassal states that come to tribute get more benefits, and even make the surrounding vassal states very keen on tribute, so that the dynasty in a poor and weak period has to stipulate the number and value of tribute to prevent the reward from being given. But Yang Song had the vision of a later generation and knew that such a superficial attitude would not work. What he wanted was actual benefits, and of course, he wanted superficial benefits too. Chapter 354, New Order. As the vassalage of the 7 territories was settled, the 3 brigades of Zaya State that were originally in Shanhaiguan set out again and marched towards the outside of Pingguan City again. The 1st and 2nd brigades of Zaya State, plus the cavalry brigade, 33,600 plus 30,000 logistics militia, more than 60,000 troops were heading towards Nanshan City. Such a battle could not be concealed, and there was no need to conceal it. Zaya State sent troops this time in the name of vassalage, so as not to violate the previous promise that it would not intervene in matters that did not concern Zaya State. Refined Zaya State porcelain was smashed to the ground by K. After hearing that Zaya State had sent troops, he really wanted to ignore everything and attack Nanshan City directly, although the city was crumbling and was about to be captured by him. But K still knew that, even if he captured Nanshan City, where he grew up now, he would have to give it up when the army of Zaya State arrived. Sometimes K really didn't want to know so much. He could ignore the strength of Zaya country and attack these traitors without any care, but he knew who drove his family out of the city in front of him. Hey. K sighed heavily and helplessly ordered the knight who came to report the news, retreat. The active retreat of the Fulimid army made the lords in Nanshan City breathe a sigh of relief. They couldn't wait to hold a party to relieve their nervous and fearful mood. 5 days later, Li Jing arrived at Nanshan City again. He went to the castle hall and stood at the door looking at a group of people who were drunk on the ground. Although he had known the nature of these natives for a long time, he couldn't help shaking his head and sighing, "These people are really..." Then he ordered behind him, "Wake them up for this, general." After that, he walked over the mess on the ground with an expressionless face and walked to the top of the hall. Soon, the drunk nobles woke up under the cold water of the soldiers. Looking at the Zaire people who were guarding the border, they realized that the Zaire army had entered the city. "Are you all sober?" Li Jing stood on the high platform in the hall, looking down at the drunkards present, confirming whether these people could listen to the next words. "Sober, sober. It's so cold. How dare you pour cold water on this lord? So it's the Zaire people who are here. Okay. Since everyone is sober, let's talk business," Li Jing said, and stepped aside, letting Chang Sunsheng out. Chang Sunsheng had an important task this time. He had to make the vassal declaration a reality, so he followed the army to this Nanshan city, which he was also familiar with. "Everyone, I'm Sun Sheng, the head of the ceremony hall of Zaire State. I believe some people present here already know me, so I will speak directly." Sun Sheng held a delicate scroll and spoke loudly to the audience in the native language. "I'm fully responsible for this vassalage. From now on, as long as you sign this agreement, you will be considered as a vassal of our country." "Vassal? What's the matter? Hasn't this lord already refused? Is it that Zaire State is forcing us?" Except for the 7 more powerful lords, the other lords of all sizes present were confused by this move of Zaire State, at a loss, and talked about it. Andre saw that Zaire State actually took out the scroll and heard the discussion around him. He really wanted to pretend that nothing had happened and not sign the so-called vassal agreement. But in the end, Andre thought that the Zaire State army had already entered the city. He had no choice but to grit his teeth and take the lead to go on stage. He had figured it out. Since he couldn't resist, he had to perform well in front of Zaire State. In the surprised and relieved eyes of the others, Andre picked up the pen and at Chang Sunsheng's signal, signed his full name at the end of the unfolded scroll, Andre Buckman. He didn't even look at the contents of the scroll carefully because he knew that, even if Xiago wrote harsher clauses on it, he would have to sign it. Andre's role model was still very useful. The other 6 lords hesitated for a while, and finally 4 of them went to the stage to sign their names. The remaining 2 lords didn't know what they were thinking, and they mixed in the crowd and didn't go to the stage. "Is there anyone else?" Chang Sunsheng waited for a while and asked loudly once, especially looking at the 2 lords who regretted their decision and took back the scroll in their evasive eyes. Chang Sunsheng put away the scroll, looked around again, and said, "Next, our country and the vassal have important matters to discuss, and the rest of you please leave." After speaking, he nodded to Li Jing on the side, indicating that it was okay. Li Jing stepped forward and said, "Since you are unwilling to be vassal states of our country, it is useless to stay in this city. You should leave quickly." "What? Are you going to drive people away now? What is the matter?" "I will not leave. Isn't Nanshan City a neutral city? Why do you dare to leave?" Li Jing saw that there were still people who were ignorant and wanted to make trouble. He waved his hand and an officer standing at the door of the hall saluted Li Jing with a fist, turned around and walked out of the castle. He immediately rushed into a row of fully armed Zaire soldiers, surrounded the people in the audience, and raised the shining bayonets on the muskets to make the noisy people shut up immediately. These cowardly bandits really don't cry until they see the coffin, and they won't give up until they see the Yellow River. At this time, Chang Sunsheng stepped forward and shouted to the audience with a cold face, "Do you think your country is not strong? Do the soldiers are not strong? Do the military equipments are not superior?" Hearing Chang Sunsheng's words, these lords, including the 5 vassal lords standing on the stage, were all shocked. They all looked at the army and generals of Zaire country in horror, as if they just remembered that everything now was decided by the Zaire people. "You guys leave quickly, don't blame me for not warning you." Chang Sunsheng saw that these people finally saw the reality and issued an ultimatum, "Send you out." After all the lords, big and small, left the castle, Chang Sunsheng turned to the 5 lords who were already vassals of the Zaire kingdom and immediately showed a kind smile, saying, "Everyone, let's talk about what to do next. Please give your orders, sir. I will listen to you." sir, and just tell me what you tell me to do. Okay, sir. The 5 people immediately expressed their opinions, saying that they would listen to Chang Sun Sheng's arrangements, and they had no opinions. Or it could be said that they dared not have any opinions. Haha, don't worry. Chang Sun Sheng saw the submissive look of the 5 people. Although he had long known that people in this world fear power but not virtue, he still couldn't help but laugh. Chang Sun Sheng laughed twice and said in a serious voice, "Since you are willing to be vassals of our country, you are no longer outsiders. You must listen carefully to what I'm going to say next." Without waiting for the 5 people opposite to respond, Chang Sun Sheng continued, "First of all, since the 5 of you are all vassals of our country, you cannot attack each other. This is very important. If there are any conflicts, you can let your country decide. This is also for your own good. Other things that require vassals to do are all in the agreement. You can go back and take a look at it slowly. Now I will tell you the benefits of being a vassal of our country." As the 5 people looked at each other in confusion, Chang Sun Sheng continued, "Since you are a vassal of our country, you have the qualifications to establish a country. That's right, just as you think, you can establish a country and call yourself a king in the future. Of course, to establish a country and call yourself a king, you must have the corresponding strength, otherwise it will be a disgrace to our Tsar country." Chang Sun Sheng's words were already clear, and he clearly told the 5 people that, since you are vassals of Tsar, you can attack forces that are not vassals of Tsar. As for these territories outside the Great Wall, Yang Song and Liug had long known that some people were unwilling to be vassals of the Tsar kingdom, and they had made corresponding countermeasures. Since they were unwilling to be vassals of the Tsar kingdom, they had to bear the corresponding consequences. Yang Song did not have the habit of pampering them. Chapter 355, Vassal State. Chang Sun Sheng's meaning was very clear, and Andre and the other 5 could certainly understand it. So when they heard this, they were all very happy. They didn't expect that they would get so many benefits without paying any price by submitting to the Tsar kingdom. Now they can openly send troops to the surrounding territories that have not submitted to the Tsar kingdom. However, Andre suddenly thought that if the surrounding territories knew the news and also submitted to the Tsar kingdom, wouldn't he be unable to send troops? So Andre immediately asked, "Sir, if the territory we just left wants to submit to the Tsar kingdom again, what will the Tsar kingdom do?" Of course, Andre would not directly say that he would send troops, so he had to inquire tactfully about how much the Tsar kingdom needed vassals. Haha. Chang Sun Sheng knew what Andre was thinking when he heard this question. He stared at him and laughed twice in Andre's eyes that he couldn't avoid. He said, "The vassal of our country can't come and go as they please." Although Chang Sun Sheng didn't say it directly, Andre and the other 5 were relieved when they heard this. They were secretly glad that they had chosen not to leave like the lords who had driven out of the castle. They now knew that choosing to leave meant choosing to lose the qualification to continue to survive. Chang Sun Sheng saw the expressions of these people, but he didn't care in his heart. The reason why Xiago implemented the vassal plan was just to find some chess pieces for itself. If the chess pieces didn't obey, they could just change a batch. It just took more energy. "My lord, I don't know who this ancient city should belong to now." Suddenly, Delhi, who was beside Andre, asked a question. This question made Andre stunned. Yes, who should this city belong to? Nanshan City is the former capital of Fulamat. It has all kinds of facilities. It is a good base camp for them. It is not too far from Tsar State, so they don't have to worry about the sudden arrival of Tsar State's army, or they can quickly get support from Tsar State. As soon as Delhi asked this question, Andre and the other 4 looked at Chang Sun Sheng, wanting to know what the people of Tsar State thought. After all, they are now all subject to Tsar State, and they want to know whether Tsar State is fair to them. Chang Sun Sheng didn't care about it at all. He didn't even think about it and replied, "Of course it is owned by the 5 of you. It also provides you with a great place for communication. As for whether Nanshan City will become the second naturalized city and become a commercial city of Tsar State's vassal state, Yang Song and the others had expected it. Of course it won't, because the indigenous forces don't have the rich variety of goods that Tsar State has." Andre and Delhi were relieved when they heard Chang Sun Sheng's answer. It seems that Xia state still treats them equally, which also gives them a bottom line for what will happen next. After this question, Chang Sheng once again talked about the matters that the vassal needed to pay attention to, such as the regular tribute and the amount of tribute, and then ended the interview. After confirming that the army of the Fulimit kingdom had really evacuated, Li Jing also returned to the Xia kingdom with the army. Although there was no battle during this expedition, the result was achieved, so it was not a wasted trip. Before returning with the army, Chang Sheng did one more thing, that is, he spread the news that Andrei's 5 forces had become vassals of the Xia kingdom. The most important piece of news was that, if the vassal of the Xia kingdom encountered an invasion by foreign enemies, it would get help from the Xia kingdom, which was the highlight. After hearing these news, many of the lords who left regretted beating their chests and stamping their feet. Isn't it just surrender? It's not like they haven't surrendered before. As long as they get the help of the Xia kingdom, it's a gold medal of immunity from death for them. There is no place to find such a good thing. But if they really asked them to go to the Xia kingdom and want to surrender on their own initiative, they couldn't do such a thing. They could only secretly comfort themselves after regretting that no one was in charge of them and they could do what they wanted. But is it really like this? The answer is of course no. After becoming a vassal of Xia, Andre and the other 5 had a good discussion and openly stated their ambitions. After several discussions, they divided the land of the former Fulimit into their own territory and agreed to help each other and wait for the right opportunity to send troops. As soon as the army of Xia left, and when Fulimit really admitted defeat and stopped sending troops, Andre and the other 5 people had a tacit understanding to launch an attack on the small territories around the territory. This scene is so familiar, just like when Nanshan territory received funding from Xia to launch an attack on the surrounding territories, leaving the surrounding territories without any ability to fight back. However, the difference is that the 5 vassals did not receive material help from Xia in this war, and the scope was far less extensive than the last time, and the intensity of the war was not as high as the last time, but the result was the same. That is, the 5 vassals who were prepared all won. Even the other 2 relatively powerful territories did not repel the vassal coalition forces and became prisoners. During the war, it was not that no territories found Xia state and wanted to surrender voluntarily, but they were all rejected by Xia state. According to the agreement between Yang Song and Liug, there did not need to be too many vassal states, but not too few either. It was best to have more than 5 and less than 10. So after having 5 sensible vassal states, Yang Song decided not to increase the number of vassal states for the time being. Because the total territory outside the pass was limited, if there were too many vassal states, the chess pieces would not have the corresponding strength, and they would not be able to resist the attack of the Fulimit state, and they would not be able to achieve the goal that Xia state wanted to achieve. Therefore, all these territories that came to the door were rejected by Xia state, which made the people of these territories regret it even more, and they wished they could slap themselves a few times at that time. In the end, the lords of these territories had no need to regret it, because they all became the souls under the sword of the vassal coalition, and even the lords who wanted to surrender to Andre and his lords would have the same consequences. Andre and his men have learned their lesson now. They no longer dare to talk about the noble spirit to these lords, because these self-reliant people are living examples. If they let these people go, because of their confusion, if these lords turn over in the future, they will have no place to cry. When the war was settled, it was already a few months later. Andre and the 5 people of Delhi had all achieved their goals. After annexing the surrounding territories, they became unprecedentedly powerful, so they met again in Nanshan. The report to Xia state said that they were discussing the establishment of a country, but in fact they were discussing getting rid of Xia state. However, in the end, considering that they had to consider the threat of Fulimit state, the strength of Xia state, and the consequences of betraying Xia state, they had to give up the idea of getting rid of Xia state. So this meeting really became a mutual discussion on the establishment of a country and the title of monarch. According to the vassal agreement, these vassal forces must obtain the consent of the suzerain state if they want to establish a country and claim the title of monarch. Finally, they jointly wrote a letter to Xia state, listing their respective needs, in order to obtain the consent of Xia state. This was exactly what the Xia kingdom wanted. So Yang Song of course agreed immediately and immediately asked Chang Sun Sheng to take his letter of appointment to the vassal power to witness the establishment of the vassal state. Chapter 356, Xia Nation's Future. In the spring of the 16th year of Xian Qi, Yang Song was accompanying his family to a small island in the East China Sea to enjoy the flowers and scenery. The layers of flowers on the island were clearly defined, and the colorful flowers were blooming one after another, making people feel that there was a special mood. This island was not far from the East China Sea, and there were originally many flowers. When Yang Song heard the report, he had an idea and asked Yang Song to sort them out. Now, in early spring, Yang Song will try to take some time every year to take his family here for vacation. Although it is a vacation, it is impossible for Yang Song to relax. Even in the Sea of Flowers, he is still thinking about the affairs of the Xia Kingdom. The 5 vassal states outside Shanhaiguan have been at war with the Kingdom of Philomet all year round, so we have completed the plan to reduce the population outside the Shanhaiguan. In the summary at the end of last year, the country had a population of 21 million, and it is expected that the goal of 30 million will be reached in another 2 years. By then, we can stop summoning people from the refugee camps, and we should think about how to solve the problem of the hundreds of thousands of indigenous laborers. As for the construction of railways, if there are suddenly so many less useful laborers, many ministers will probably oppose it, which is also a problem. By the way, that enclave far away in the northern region has not sent anyone there for so many years. I don't know what the situation is. It is estimated that it has been taken back by others a long time ago. Yang Song sat in the pavilion, watching his family playing and laughing among the flowers, but there was no moment of leisure in his heart. After all, so many years have passed, and he has become accustomed to being busy. Xiao Juan saw Yang Song sitting in a daze in the pavilion, and hurriedly ran a few steps closer, waved her hand at Yang Song, and said with a smile, My king, come and play. Look how beautiful it is here. Well, okay, you guys play first, I'll be there soon. Yang Song came back to the present from these thoughts, and couldn't help but laugh at his busy life. He was never idle. Yang Song only stayed on this island for 5 days in total. After returning to Xian Qi City, he looked at the piled up memorials in the study, shook his head again, sighed, and immediately started to deal with his backlog of government affairs. These backlogged government affairs are generally ordinary affairs. If he really encounters something that requires him to make a decision immediately, someone will send it to him. While dealing with it, Yang Song saw a proposal submitted by Lurk. After reading it, he exclaimed, huh, and said to himself, I didn't expect Lurk to suggest stopping the recruitment of refugees now. I'll ask him what he thinks later. After saying that, he put the memorial aside and looked at the next one. However, a whole day passed by like this, and the room was illuminated by candlelight at some point. The original plan of later to ask Lurk questions now seemed impossible. At this moment, Yang Song was not a person who didn't sympathize with his subjects, and he would not call someone in the middle of the night to discuss a matter that was not too urgent. The next day was a monthly Grand Court meeting, which meant that it was the last day of March in the 16th year of Xian Qi. After handling the affairs of state for a month, Yang Song took out the memorial written by Lurk suggesting to stop the recruitment of refugees, asked Lurk to read it himself, and then asked the ministers, what do you think? Your Majesty, I second this proposal. As soon as Yang Song finished speaking, Zhen Yu stepped out and bowed in agreement, saying, now all the newly recruited people need to undergo a short period of training before they can adapt to the life in their country. With the increase in the number of recruited people, the cost of training materials and personnel is huge. That's right. Lurk turned around and bowed, saying, Your Majesty, the Xia Kingdom now has a population of more than 20 million, and there are still more than 3 years away from the 10-year deadline. With Your Majesty's policy of encouraging childbirth, according to Zun Zengai and my minister's calculations, the number of births alone will reach 30 million in the next 3 years. It's just that. At this point, Lurk glanced at Zun Yu and the many ministers present, hesitated for a moment, and continued, it's just that in the next 10 years, a large part of the country's population will be children, and they will not be able to contribute to the country. As soon as Liug finished speaking, Wei Dong, who was in charge of civil affairs under the administrative department, stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, as the military advisor said, I suggest that it will not be too late to stop recruiting refugees when the country has sufficient labor." Wei Dong was the chief officer directly in charge of this area, so Yang Song wanted to hear his opinion. "Oh, tell me in detail." "Yes, Your Majesty." Wei Dong bowed and replied, "Your Majesty, although the matter of recruiting refugees is as the military advisor and Sun Zengzi said, our country is in need of a large number of laborers right now. If we stop recruiting the people, there will be a huge gap in the country's labor force in the next 10 years. I hope Your Majesty will think twice." Liug also knew this, otherwise he would not have hesitated for a moment just now, but compared to this disadvantage, he still chose to make long-term plans. So he replied immediately, "Your Majesty, the labor gap can be filled by the native young and strong in a short time, as long as these few years pass. However, if we continue to recruit refugees, it will not be conducive to the stability of our country's society. In the long run, it will hinder the country's development momentum." Liug's starting point. Yang Song thought about it and knew what the other party was talking about. After all, the crime rate in Xia State has increased year by year in recent years. After statistics, it was found that most of them were caused by the fact that the recruited people were not adapted to the life of this era. No, Zhao Ze, who was in charge of public security, immediately stepped out and bowed, saying, "Your Majesty, I think what Liu Junshi said is right. In recent years, the number of criminals in our country has increased dramatically. There are not a few murderers and arsonists. There are also large and small gangs that have been born, which greatly disturb the public security of our country." After Zhao Ze said these heartfelt words, he remembered those years when the king was not yet the king and Xia State was not yet the Xia State. The public security at that time could be described as no one locks the door at night and no one picks up lost items on the road. Now, his originally unimportant position has become unusually busy. As for the public security, Yang Song had already prepared himself mentally. After all, the population of Xia State was already more than 20 million, not the original 3,000 people. As the number of people increased, all kinds of people would emerge, and it was natural that the crime rate would rise. However, this was not the reason why Yang Song gave up recruiting refugees, but Xinyu's next words made him make the final decision. "Your Majesty, I have something to say." Xinyu and other people with different views had almost finished arguing, and then he stepped forward and bowed, saying, "Your Majesty, the labor gap is only temporary, and criminals can be arrested, but the future of Xia State still needs your decision." "What does Wen Ruo mean by this?" Yang Song frowned and asked the other party. When he heard this, what is the future of Xia State? Why does he have to make the decision? This question came too suddenly. Xinyu bowed deeply to Yang Song again, and after standing up, he slowly said, "In the future, will Xia Kingdom conquer the world, or develop in isolation? Will it be a million slaves or a universal peace? Will it be for the sake of the country's prosperity for generations, or just for the sake of power today?" Yang Song didn't take Xinyu's words seriously at first. Isn't this nonsense? Is there still a choice? But Yang Song tasted it carefully and found Xinyu's good intentions. Yes, these seemingly non-choice problems will become impossible to achieve when accumulated in small things. Just like the decision to give up the use of indigenous slaves. Not only did it not abandon them, but it has become more and more. What is going on? Is there really no one available in Xia Kingdom? Obviously not. Then the problem is worth Yang Song's deep thought. Take the issue of indigenous slaves for example. If this continues, no one in Xia will be willing to do the hard work, and the people may even start wars for slaves. This is an unhealthy state mentally, let alone development. The same is true for conscripting refugees. Population growth is a process, and a sudden surge in population will have a huge impact on society, especially if the new population is not adapted to the times, which will become a time bomb for Xia. Chapter 357, Negotiating the Future. As Yang Song thought about it, he realized that the words of Xinyu and others were like a blow to him. It turned out that he was no longer the innocent young man before. He kept asking himself whether his original intention was still there. Today's Xia Kingdom is no longer the time when it first came to this world. At that time, even a small matter had to be very cautious. It was also treading on thin ice for this world, fearing that it would die without a burial place if it was not careful. But now, looking back at the past, I found that both he and the people around him have changed. Maybe the only thing that remains unchanged is the world itself and the pace of progress of Chinese civilization. Yang Song took a deep breath and exhaled for a long time, as if he wanted to spit out something in his heart. When are you? Oh, Bowen, if you have any suggestions, please speak frankly. Yang Song decided to calm down and listen carefully to the voices of his subjects. Yes, King. Seeing Yang Song in such a state, Zhen Yu and Liug bowed deeply to Yang Song from the bottom of their hearts. Your Majesty, the affairs of the world today are nothing more than domestic and foreign affairs. Liug spoke first. Zun Zhengai will talk about domestic affairs, and I will talk about foreign affairs. While Liug was speaking, he nodded slightly to Zhen Yu beside him, and Zhen Yu raised his hand to Liug, which was considered as an acceptance. Yang Song hummed and said, go ahead. He was ready to listen for a long time. Yes, Your Majesty. After Liug bowed to Yang Song again, he looked at the officials present sideways. I don't know what he thought of, or whether he was organizing his words. When Liug faced Yang Song again, he slowly said, Your Majesty, colleagues. Outside the Xia Kingdom, there is the land to the north of Penguin City. The land in the north is vast and vast. According to the intelligence estimates of various parties, it is at least more than 30 million square kilometers. Above it, the star disks of lords and countries are scattered like fireflies in the dark night, small but numerous. Liug's description of foreign countries was from big to small, from the whole to the part. The 6 monarchies closest to our country are 1 big and 5 small ones, and the 5 small ones are our vassal states. For our country's sake, we have united to attack the big ones. Now we have fought repeatedly, and many parties have suffered heavy casualties to achieve the expected goal. Liug was talking about what happened after the Xia Kingdom had completely withdrawn its troops. Now it is no longer the time for the Fulimit Kingdom to take the initiative to attack. Because of the attitude of the Xia Kingdom, Parker no longer dares to take the initiative to attack. For the attacks of the 5 countries, he can only defend. The 5 vassal states of the Xia Kingdom, now relying on the support of the Xia Kingdom, are not worried about any force invading their territory. Because they want to kill Fulimit, the 5 countries have launched attacks on Fulimit from time to time, wanting to completely eliminate their mortal enemy. Although Fulimit dare not attack, it is still a piece of cake to defend against several small countries that are not united. The monarchs of the 5 countries were not discouraged and launched a series of attacks on Fulimit, as if the lives of their subordinates were not their lives. Maybe the Xia Kingdom gave them enough instructions. There are 13 large and small forces to the north of the 6 countries and south of the river, and 7 territories to the west. There is no fixed number of changes in the forces in the distant places. There is only a big country in the far west, called Elma Country or AI Country, covering nearly 1 million square kilometers. Yang Song heard this, and took a look at the system map. He found that there was indeed a large force 2,000 kilometers west of Penguin City, but because the distance was too far, it had nothing to do with Xia Country. And the north of the river is the central place in the hearts of the BIE people. It is the cultural center of BIE. There are more than a dozen territories of different sizes, with a long heritage and prosperous trade. But because of this, there has been no change in recent years, and they are powerless to deal with the wars between the north and the south. The people in this world originally lived well according to their convention, but because of the sudden arrival of the unruly Xia Country, their order was completely disrupted. Now only this so-called center still stubbornly maintains that fragile order. Further north is the land of the Northern Territory. This place is bitter and cold, and the people are fierce. Since the war began, there have been constant attacks, and it is common for cities to change hands. Liug said this, as if he remembered that Xia state still had a nominal land in this area. Your Majesty, nominally, there is a vassal and a city of our country on the ice and snow island outside the Northern Territory, but the distance is too far, and our country is really out of reach, so we can only let it go. Hearing this, Zhenyu next to him also nodded slightly, agreeing with Liug's statement. Yang Song certainly remembered that place. It was the farthest place that the Xia state fleet had gone to. Originally, his plan was to use the exploration fleet to open up the trade route on the sea, but the shipbuilding technology in this world was too backward, and there was no condition for long distance voyages at all, and there was really no basic facilities. This made his sea road, that he was preparing to realize in this world, end in failure. After that, Xia state's ships never made long voyages again, because it was really unnecessary. It was not realistic to rely on Xia state's people to take the initiative to go out to sea for business. In fact, it is not that the people of Xia cannot go out to sea to do business, but that the goods of this world are of no use to Xia. The people of Xia will not get any benefits after going out to sea, so of course no one is willing to do it. After seeing Liug finish talking about foreign affairs, Zhenyu continued to say, "Your Majesty, everyone, the most urgent domestic affairs are the conscription of refugees and the labor of natives. In fact, the domestic affairs of Xia have been explained clearly enough in the big and small court meetings, so Zhenyu only said the problems that need to be solved now. I think that the conscription of refugees should be stopped, and the labor of natives should be gradually abandoned." Yang Song did not speak. He knew that Zhenyu should have something else to say, and he could not make a decision based on the other party's conclusions. According to my calculations, even if refugees are no longer conscripted, the population of our country will reach 30 million at the latest 20 years before Qianqi, which is enough to complete the plan of that year. Sure enough, Zhenyu explained his reasons. As for the indigenous laborers, now that steam engines are everywhere in the country, the role they can play is limited, and the cost of supporting hundreds of thousands of laborers is not small. I hope the king will make a wise decision. As for the other impacts of these two issues, they have actually been made very clear. Now it is Yang Song's turn to make a decision. After Zhenyu finished speaking, the council hall suddenly became quiet, but Yang Song did not answer immediately, but fell into deep thought. After an unknown amount of time, Yang Song raised his head and asked everyone in the hall, "Do you think so too? The king is wise." Needless to say, this sentence has already shown their attitude. Even if some individuals are unwilling, because of their own interests, they have to agree under such a general trend. Okay. Seeing this, Yang Song finally made a decision. If that's the case, then stop recruiting refugees first. The population growth depends entirely on the existing population base. As for the indigenous labor, Yang Song was very decisive in his decision to stop recruiting refugees, but he was still a little hesitant about giving up the use of indigenous labor. After all, he launched a war for this and destroyed an indigenous country. He felt a little bit of a loss if he just said he wouldn't use it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358, The Way Forward for the Young and Strong. As for the labor and rest of the natives, when are you and Bowen? Isn't it too hasty to give up all of them at once? Yang Song still hadn't made up his mind. Just as he asked, so many labor gaps can't be filled immediately. Hearing Yang Song's inquiry, Zhenyu immediately cupped his hands and replied, "Reply to the king, it is true. So I suggest that the abandonment of the native labor should be gradual, not overnight." Zhenyu and Liug certainly knew that giving up the use of native labor would not be completed in a short time. Yang Song then asked, then how should the abandoned natives be resettled? So many young and strong natives, even if Xiago didn't use them, it would not be so simple to release them directly. You must know that, although these young and strong natives are doing high intensity labor in Xiago, Xiago has not lacked their food and clothing. Over the years, these young and strong natives have become stronger. If these hundreds of thousands of young and strong people who have undergone preliminary training are released directly outside the pass, wouldn't it provide hundreds of thousands of elite soldiers to the native countries outside the pass? Even if they were given to vassal states, it would not work. This would break the balance outside the pass and fail to achieve the goal that Xia wanted to achieve. Your Majesty, the native laborers of our country are young and strong, and it would be a pity to abandon them directly. Lurk, who was standing aside, replied at this moment, I suggest forming a vassal army and equipping them with the obsolete military equipment of our country. This will not only solve the problem of abandoning the young and strong, but also allow our country to stockpile military equipment and shine again. Thirdly, it will solve the problem of too few troops in our country. Fourthly, even if the native young and strong die on the battlefield, they can be regarded as loyal to the country. Lurk's suggestion made Yang Song's eyes light up. Yes, the army is an independent system, which avoids a lot of trouble, and there will be no dependence, and it will not affect the people of Xia. As for the other benefits mentioned by Lurk, Yang Song also deeply agreed. Hearing Lurk's suggestion, Li Jing, who had been listening quietly, immediately stepped out and clasped his fists to Yang Song, saying, Your Majesty, I second the military advisor's proposal. Although our army is now brave and invincible, its number is still too small. Li Jing then reported, for example, the last time we went out to fight, if our army was not too small, with more than enough offense and less defense, our country could have completely occupied Nanshan City. The reason why Xia State implemented various strategies against the natives outside the pass was that Xia State's military strength was insufficient. Even if it occupied the place, it could not guarantee its stability, because the test of the security war was whether the number of troops was large enough. Yang Song saw that Li Jing also said so, and this was also the common suggestion of his three important ministers. He no longer hesitated, and immediately made a decision, saying, in this case, we will gradually abandon the labor of the natives within this year, and incorporate them all into the army, to form a vassal army. Your Majesty is wise. All the ministers bowed in admiration. Yang Song waved his hand, signaling the ministers to excuse themselves, and then ordered, the vassal army can only be equipped with melee weapons, not bows and crossbows. This is one thing. Secondly, the vassal army must be stationed far away from where civilians live, and must be strictly guarded so as not to disturb the civilians. In any case, even if the natives are loyal to the Xia kingdom, and are willing to be driven by it, they are not Xia people after all, so they still have to be on guard. Yes, Your Majesty. Li Jing heard Yang Song's order and answered confidently, I suggest that the garrison of the vassal army be set up outside Shanhaiguan, and within Pingguan City. I second the proposal. Hearing Li Jing's words, Lurk hurriedly bowed and followed up, Your Majesty, if the vassal army is stationed in the place mentioned by General Li, it can avoid disturbing the people of our country, and it can also make it the first powerful barrier of our country, and let people from the outside know that there are also people from the north in our country. Yang Song knew what Lurk meant by the last sentence. If the natives in the north saw that Xia had such a well-equipped native army, they could let go of their vigilance against Xia, and it was more likely that some of the natives would volunteer to join the army to supplement the consumption of the vassal army. However, in this way, the Xia people had just eliminated their dependence on the young and strong natives, and it was possible that the Xia army would rely on the natives again, turning the Xia army into a young master army. This is not okay. So Yang Song told his subordinates about this question. Your Majesty is right. Both Lurk and Li Jing agreed with Yang Song's concerns. Even Zun Yu, the chief administrative officer, could not help but nod his head. Since Lurk dared to make a suggestion, he certainly knew the pros and cons, so he immediately replied, Your Majesty, don't worry. The vassal army is just a stopgap measure. Disarmament is much easier. So that's it. Now Yang Song finally knew what Lurk was thinking. Compared with the civilians, the army did not have so many conflicts of interest. It could be said that, if they gave up, they would give up immediately. Moreover, Lurk also said that this was just a stopgap measure, just to solve the problem of the lack of troops in the Xia kingdom. That's good. Yang Song nodded slightly and ordered, the vassal army can only have this batch, and it is strictly forbidden to supplement from outside. Once it is exhausted, it will be disbanded. Yes, my king. Seeing that the problem of the young and strong natives had been solved, Yang Song raised a new question about the problem of the small number of Xia's army raised by Li Jing just now. Just now, the pharmacist mentioned the problem of the small number of troops. Do you have any solution? Is it to recruit new troops or expand the existing establishment? Since the problem has been discovered, it should be solved. Besides, the shortcomings of the army must be solved in advance, otherwise the army will let the vassal army continue for various reasons. This is very likely to happen. The lessons from the past are still there. Now the total population of Zaire has reached more than 20 million, and there are only more than 60,000 people including the navy, less than 100,000 people. The ratio of military to civilian is a little more than 1:300, which is really a bit small. Yang Song secretly calculated that according to the current national strength of Zaire state, it would be no problem to support a million-strong army, but in this way, he would not be able to take care of the development of people's livelihood, and he could not be so diligent in military affairs. Besides, the military academy was established not long ago, and there were not enough officers to command, so now Yang Song wanted to listen to the opinions of the ministers. Zhen Yu saw that the next thing was the military, so he bowed to Yang Song, returned to his original position, and thought carefully about the replacement of indigenous labor. Lurk and Li Jing heard Yang Song's question and did not answer immediately because Yang Song's question came very suddenly, and no matter how smart they were, they could not think of a good solution immediately. Seeing this, Yang Song also knew that the expansion of the army should not be rushed, and he did not urge him. Instead, he waved his hand, skipped this topic, and announced the adjournment. Chapter 359. Changes in the study. After the court meeting, Yang Song took Lurk and Li Jing back to the study room, ready to discuss the issue of expanding the army again. In fact, the development of the Zaire army has been very fast. In less than 20 years, it has been expanded and reorganized several times. However, compared with the rapidly increasing population of Zaire, it is not so conspicuous. With the growth of Zaire's population, the development of wasteland is also expanding rapidly, so the scope of defense required has also increased. Even if there are not many threats, it is still necessary to have what is needed. It is impossible to wait until it is needed to do it, and then it will only be too late to regret it. Pharmacist, what you said at the court meeting really touched my heart. After Yang Song greeted the two and sat down, he nodded and praised Li Jing. If the land outside the pass was not too large and there were no natural barriers available, I would not have let the army retreat. This is what Yang Song said in his heart. No monarch would dislike too much territory, and even if there is, it would not be him, Yang Song. As for the 58,000-man army of the Zaire kingdom, they could still be fearless in attack, but they were not good at defense, and could not take care of everything. Until now, the Zaire kingdom could be safe and sound with only these 58,000-man army, relying on the geographical advantage of Shanhaiguan. For this reason, they also used gunpowder to destroy the other small roads leading to the Linhai Basin. Otherwise, they would not be sitting on the Dioite like now, watching the war between the natives outside the pass with a smile. When Li Jing heard Yang Song's words, he clasped his fists and bowed, saying, "Your Majesty, I did not advise you before, because our country needed to develop people's livelihood first. Now that Sun Zengzi has made it clear, I dare to advise you directly. I hope your Majesty will forgive me." No. Yang Song waved his hand and said nonchalantly, "I have always said that, if you have any suggestions that benefit the country and the people, just speak up. I will not blame you. On the contrary, if you hide them, I will be angry. Your Majesty is wise." Lurk hurriedly clasped his hands and praised, "Your Majesty is right. Now is the time to carry out the next round of military expansion." It is unknown which of Yang Song's words Lurk agreed with. Well, Yang Song thought for a while, nodded slightly, and said, "Then how should the military expansion be carried out this time?" Military affairs have always been very important to Yang Song, and he also separated them from civil affairs. This is why Yang Song immediately dismissed the meeting, after he finished talking about how to expand the army at the court meeting just now, and then asked Lurk and Li Jing to come to the study, to discuss with him alone. Lurk glanced at Li Jing, who was silent, and bowed, saying, "As mentioned at the Great King's Assembly, the military academy has been established for less than 5 years. If we expand new brigades, there are not enough officers at all levels. Therefore, we can only expand the existing army." Yang Song hummed, and could not deny it. He did not express his opinion immediately, but turned to Li Jing and asked, "Pharmacist, how is the Army Academy now?" Li Jing is the president of the Army Academy, and he also founded the academy. Of course, he knows everything about the academy. Li Jing answered without thinking. The Army Academy currently has 1,343 students, including 150 in the Infantry Command Department and 150 in the Cavalry Command Department. Li Jing gave a detailed introduction to the situation of the Army Academy, and finally said, "The first batch of 300 graduating students will graduate in the summer of this year, the 16th year of Cheyenne Qi, and serve the king." Very good. Yang Song was very satisfied when he heard that in a few months he would have a group of systematically educated officers available. These officers who were trained from scratch by the Xia Kingdom Army Academy were loyal to Yang Song. Moreover, these students were selected from the best students with high academic achievements, and their cultural knowledge was very solid, not to mention that they had lived in Xia State since childhood, and their sense of identity with Xia State was completely different from those refugees who had just been recruited. This was another reason why Yang Song decided to stop recruiting refugees. Suddenly, Yang Song felt something was wrong and asked in confusion, "I remember that the first batch of students of the Army Academy recruited 500 outstanding graduates from high schools. Why are there only 300 now?" Reply to the king. Li Jing heard Yang Song's question and hurriedly clasped his fists and replied, "At the beginning, I wrote a letter because I wanted to train a group of useful people for the king, so I eliminated 200 people by elimination." Hearing Li Jing's words, Yang Song remembered that there was such a thing. He summoned Li Jing to ask him in detail. Li Jing said at the time that, since we were going to build a military academy, we had to build a good one, so Yang Song agreed. Finally, Li Bao from the Naval Academy also followed the elimination plan after hearing the news. This is not surprising. It happened too long ago, and he had too many things to do. Yang Song could not possibly remember everything. But if we expand the army, based on the existing organization, how many people should we have? Yang Song seemed to want to avoid this topic, and hurriedly turned to ask Liug about the expansion of the army. "Your Majesty, I dare to ask General Li a few questions, before I make any suggestions." Liug did not answer Yang Song's question immediately, but stood up, and bowed to Yang Song. "What's the question?" "Sit down and talk." Yang Song waved his hand for Liug to sit down, and he was a little curious about what questions Liug wanted to ask Li Jing. "Yes, thank you, Your Majesty." Liug bowed again, sat down and turned to Li Jing, and asked, "May I ask General Li, in the last defensive counterattack, did you feel any inconvenience in command?" "Military advisor, please ask." Li Jing returned the salute to Liug with a fist. Hearing the other party's first question, although he didn't know what Liug wanted to know, he still answered truthfully, "I didn't feel it." Then was the march fast enough? This was Liug's second question. Li Jing hesitated for a moment after hearing this question, and looked at Yang Song. In Yang Song's affirmative eyes, he still answered truthfully, "The cavalry brigade moves very quickly, and the infantry brigade has many artillery. It is inevitable that the action will be slow." Well, Liug heard Li Jing's answer, nodded, paused for a moment, and then said, "The last question. After the last battle, what shortcomings does General Li think the current organization has?" Liug's last question was no longer asking Li Jing a question, but asking Li Jing to talk about the shortcomings of the army's organization. It was not known what Liug was asking, as if he must know what Li Jing knew, or that Liug was telling Li Jing that he was hiding his incompetence. Li Jing was not without political acumen. As soon as Liug finished speaking, Li Jing heard Liug's hidden meaning. He was immediately shocked, and hurriedly stood up, and clasped his fists towards Yang Song, saying, "My king, please forgive me. I did not conceal it on purpose. I was just thinking of telling you during this military expansion." Yang Song frowned at Li Jing and asked calmly, "In other words, if I had not decided to expand the army this time, you would not have told me?" "My king, your servant, your servant." Seeing this, Li Jing immediately knelt on one knee, at a loss. He could not think of how to defend himself for a long time. In the end, he had no choice but to plead guilty. "I know my crime. It was not that Li Jing did not want to exonerate himself, but that he was basically cornered by Liug in his current situation. Whatever he said now would be wrong. Instead of talking too much and provoking Yang Song, it would be wiser to confess his guilt directly. Without waiting for Yang Song to express his opinion, Liug immediately stood up, bowed to Yang Song and said, "Your Majesty, please calm down. I think General Li should be cautious. After all, the organization of the army is such a big thing, and General Li needs to verify it repeatedly. I hope that your majesty will not blame General Li for his unintentional mistake in view of his contributions over the years." When Li Jing heard Liug's words, he looked up at Liug in surprise, and then immediately lowered his head again, as if he had realized something, looking at the floor without saying a word, just waiting for Yang Song's disposal. "Okay, I'm not going to send him away, sit down." Yang Song frowned and looked at Liug. The other party's behavior was a little abnormal from the beginning, and he decided to investigate it carefully. "You sit down too," Yang Song said to Li Jing, who was kneeling on the ground. "Whether he is guilty or not is another matter. You should answer the questions just now." Chapter 360. No merits but no faults. "Yes, your majesty." Li Jing stood up obediently, clasped his fists, and saluted Yang Song. After sitting down cautiously, he thought for a while and replied, "Your Majesty, the army currently organized in accordance with the firearms training code is too heavy. Although it is equipped with many war horses to improve its shortcomings, it has very high requirements for logistics and officers. If it were not for the strong national strength of our country, a single brigade of more than 5,000 war horses would be difficult to bear." Yang Song nodded gently to Li Jing's answer to show his agreement. "Yes, a brigade of 11,200 people has 5,250 cavalry, and this does not include the rest of the infantry officers, guards, communications and other troops. With so many war horses, if Yang Song had not raised war horses in large quantities in the past to prevent any eventuality, there would not be the current brigades. Not to mention the 150 field artillery pieces and 30 siege artillery pieces of a standard brigade, as well as the muskets for each person. This is a complete test of a country's comprehensive national strength. If the power of Zaya country had not been strong enough after the steam engine and industrialization, the existing armies alone would have been enough to give Yang Song a headache. While Yang Song was sighing inwardly, Li Jing continued to speak. "Your Majesty, the fate of a country lies in the enemy as well as in oneself. I dare to say that in my opinion, our army is strong, but a little excessive." "Excessive? Do you mean that our army is too strong?" Yang Song felt funny when he saw Li Jing nodding confirmation. It was the first time he heard someone dislike that his power was too strong. Only monarchs would dislike that their power was too small. How could there be a monarch who disliked that it was too strong? Yang Song said that he would never think so anyway. Li Jing didn't know what Yang Song felt in his heart, but he could probably guess, so he explained, "I hope the king will understand. What I mean is that the strength of a single brigade is too great, not that our country's military is too strong. On the contrary, in my opinion, our country's military is too weak and needs to be expanded." After saying this, Li Jing paused. Seeing that Yang Song had understood something, he continued, "Looking at the four corners of our country, the barbarians are all vulnerable, but there are many of them. From the past to the present, they have been a threat to our country, and have never changed." Hearing this, Yang Song finally understood what Li Jing wanted to say. He wanted to hear what the other party said next. After all, Li Jing raised this question at this time, and he wanted to see what solution Li Jing had for it. Yes, from the beginning of coming to this world, Yang Song had to mobilize all the people to become soldiers because of his own weakness, but even so, he trained a small elite for the future. Later, when he had established a firm foothold in this world, in order to deal with the numerous threats from the natives, Yang Song maintained the previous system, except that the number of elite professional troops increased. Now, the Zaya kingdom has become stronger, and the previous system of universal military service no longer exists. Only a part of the militia used for logistical support remains. However, even after many reorganizations and expansions, the regular army is very small compared to the rapidly growing population of the Zaya kingdom. Your Majesty, after the last war, I found that my country's military strength is too small, so I propose to reorganize my country's army. Li Jing's words were to tell Yang Song that he was not intentionally concealing it, and he would take time to study it. Without waiting for Yang Song to express his opinion, Li Jing immediately talked about the solution he had thought of during this period of time. After he finished speaking, I suggest reorganizing our country's existing army and changing the brigade into a division. When Yang Song heard this important sentence, he immediately asked curiously, change the brigade into a division? How to change it? Replying to the king, Li Jing clasped his fists and replied, I suggest changing the army's organization from 5 levels of platoon, company, battalion, regiment, and brigade to 6 levels of squad, platoon, company, battalion, regiment, and division. Under the original platoon, a new level of squad will be established, and the brigade will be changed to a division. Oh, tell me in detail. Yang Song leaned forward with interest. He wanted to hear the reason why Li Jing made such a change. Yes, Your Majesty. After receiving the order, Li Jing began to talk about the suggestion he had thought about for a long time from the beginning. After the last war, I felt that my country's troops were too small and there were not enough available generals. Later, I carefully analyzed the details of my country's troops and the situation inside and outside my country, and came to this conclusion: our battle with the enemy is not about cavalry, but about numbers and artillery. Your Majesty, military advisor. Li Jing said this, and after clasping his fists to Yang Song and Liug, who was listening quietly on the side, he continued, from the past to the present, in our country's wars, whether it is defending a pass, or marching to break a city, cavalry has rarely been used. Besides, although the military system recorded in the firearms training code is powerful, it does not conform to our country's current situation. Go on. When Yang Song heard this, his face had become extremely serious without knowing when. Yes, Your Majesty. Li Jing had nothing left to say so far, and he continued, the military system that I have reorganized is that the division level is different from the military system recorded in the firearms training code, with a number of 46,500 people, while the division in the firearms training code is one level above the brigade, with a total of 62,000 people. My military system is divided into standard divisions and cavalry divisions. Li Jing explained the causes and consequences to Yang Song, and then he explained in detail his detailed organization after the army's reorganization. The standard division is commanded by a general with the rank of lieutenant general, assisted by a chief of staff with the rank of major general. Please see the latest works for details. By the time Li Jing finished explaining the specific contents of the new organization in detail, a long time had passed. Before Yang Song could react, Liug, who had been listening quietly, immediately clapped his hands and praised after listening to Li Jing's explanation. Great. General Li's change is really great. After General Li's change, the problem of insufficient military personnel was solved, and the actual needs of the country and abroad were met. It also solved the problem of military rank promotion for the king's soldiers who had been fighting for a long time. This is really killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Just when Yang Song was still wondering what Liug said was wonderful, Liug had already explained his wonderfulness clearly. After listening to the 3 benefits mentioned by Liug, Yang Song suddenly realized that Li Jing's suggestion had so many benefits. In particular, the problem of military rank promotion of soldiers had troubled him for a long time, but he had not found a solution. Over the years, the Xia Kingdom has gone through many wars, and the army has been changed and expanded many times. Although Yang Song has rewarded them for their various contributions, the ranks of several major generals are still major generals at the beginning, and have never changed. This is a big problem for Yang Song, who is determined to be a wise king. After all, merits must be expressed. Now, after Liug said this, Yang Song realized that Li Jing's change to the military system actually solved this problem for him, which was really a merit without fault. But since you think this change is so wonderful, then tell me what are the disadvantages of doing this? Although Yang Song was happy in his heart, he still wanted to hear what the culprit had to say. Replying to the king, General Li's change has practical reasons, so it must be reasonable. Liug restrained the smile on his face and replied seriously, but I must point out its shortcomings. That is, after General Lee's change, the mobility of the army will be seriously reduced. However, General Lee has just reported this point, so I will not say more. Then what else is there, Bo Wen? In fact, Yang Song now agrees with Li Jing's suggestion in his heart, but for Liug's nonsense, Yang Song suddenly became curious and wanted to hear Liug's other unique insights. When Liug heard Yang Song's question to him, he didn't know why his king suddenly came up with such a trick to him, which really caught him off guard. But Liug is Liug. In the few seconds, when he bowed his hands in response and said yes, he had already thought of the answer. Chapter 361, Guard Organization. Your Majesty, if we talk about other benefits of the reorganization of the army, it is that such military positions can be formed in large numbers. Secondly, it saves a large number of war horses for the country. Liug's words about saving war horses are actually right and wrong, but Yang Song knows that he is talking about the military system recorded in the firearm training code. The focus is still on the first half of Liug's words. One of the reasons why the Xia Kingdom only formed 2 infantry brigades and 1 cavalry brigade in the past was that the cost was too high. It could not afford to form more brigades. Even if the whole country could build more brigades, the current Xia Kingdom would not be what it is today. Now after listening to Li Jing's new military system, although a standard division has a total of 46,500 people, it only has 3,000 cavalry, 300 field artillery, and 100 siege artillery. Compared with the existing standard brigade, there are 150 field artillery, 30 siege artillery, and 5,250 cavalry. Not to mention the cavalry. In fact, from the proportion of the number of people, the number of artillery has been seriously reduced. In this way, if you want to expand the army to the same number of people, compared with the newly formed brigades, this can save war horses and artillery. It's just that the firepower is a little insufficient, and there is not enough mobility. But Yang Song turned his head and thought, isn't there a separate cavalry division for mobility, which can completely make up for this part of the shortage? And 3,000 cavalry are actually not a small number. As for the decline in firepower, it depends on who is targeted. If the enemy has muskets and artillery like the Xia Kingdom, then Yang Song will definitely follow the military system recorded in the firearm training code. But who makes the enemy just a group of natives who are still using swords and spears? With a sufficient number of musketeers plus the necessary artillery support, as well as a small number of cavalry to coordinate, the strength of a standard division is enough to deal with a medium-sized war. This is the reason why the firepower of a single brigade is a little too strong, as Li Jing just said, because there is really no need to equip so many artillery and cavalry. What the Xia army lacks now is not firepower, but scale. Li Jing's change is aimed at the strengths and weaknesses of Xia and is completely applicable to the current national conditions of Xia. Yang Song roughly estimated in his mind that without changing the number of existing troops, it is completely possible to expand all existing brigades to divisions. A cavalry division has 40,500 people, 2 standard divisions have a total of 93,000 people, and a city guard army expanded to the standard division level, not counting the Imperial Guards and Jinai Wei directly under Yang Song. There are a total of 180,000 people. Enough for the current use of Xia. If the Imperial Guards and Jinai Wei directly under Yang Song are also expanded accordingly, when the army was changed and expanded in the past, the total number of Xia's troops will definitely exceed 200,000. As for the navy of Xia, there is actually no such thing as direct or not, and it has always been under the direct command of Yang Song. Moreover, the navy focuses on warships, not on the number of people, and the number of people is not large, so many times it is not within the consideration of Li Jing and others. Let's decide it like this. Yang Song made a decision after considering this. He breathed a sigh of relief, smiled, looked at Li Jing and said, "Pharmacist, next time you should inform me of such things in advance. This time you have made a great contribution. Thank you, Your Majesty. Your Majesty is wise. I dare not take credit for it." Li Jing was relieved to some extent when he heard Yang Song's words. Your Majesty is wise. General Li has done a great deed. Liug also followed suit and agreed with Yang Song's words, as if what he said before had never existed. Yang Song waved his hand and ignored everything else. Instead, He thought about the Imperial Guards and the embroidered uniform guards, and then asked Li Jing and Lurk, pharmacist, Bo, when the army reorganization has been decided. I wonder what you think of the Imperial Guards? Replying to the king, the Imperial Guards are the king's personal army, and we dare not speak rashly. Lurk bowed his hands, paused for a moment, and then replied, however, every time the army was expanded in the past, the king's personal army would also be reorganized and expanded. Since the king asked, I believe the king is also preparing to reorganize the king's personal army this time. Well, that's right. After Yang Song nodded to confirm Lurk's words, he turned and asked, then how should the Imperial Guards be reorganized? In the past, whether it was the Imperial Guards or the embroidered uniform guards, the reorganization and expansion were different from the rest of the army. Li Jing knew what Yang Song meant. After hearing Yang Song's confirmation, he clasped his fists and replied, Your Majesty, the king once indicated that the Imperial Guards are the country's strategic mobile army. Therefore, I suggest that certain changes be made to the organization of the standard division to enable it to exert the power of strategic mobility. Lurk nodded after hearing what Li Jing said, and added, more than that, since the Imperial Guard is the king's personal army, its organization must also play the role of garrisoning the capital, key passes and protecting the king. Very good. Then how should the Imperial Guard be organized? Yang Song heard what the two said, agreed and asked for specific details. In the middle of the process, Yang Song decided to reorganize the Jinai Wei as well, so he called Zhao Wu, who was in charge of commanding the Imperial Guard, and Wang Wei, who was in charge of commanding the Jinai Wei. After discussing together, they determined the specific organization of the Imperial Guard and the Jinai Wei. Just as Lurk and Li Jing said, the army directly under Yang Song had a very different positioning, and the final organization was very different from the standard division. First of all, the Imperial Guard was modified according to the scale of the standard division, reducing the 5 standard regiments of the standard division to 3, but correspondingly adding 2 cavalry regiments to strengthen its mobile force, and finally changing the standard division's 1 artillery battalion to 2. The total strength of the Imperial Guard is 45,300 people, with 390 field artillery pieces, 130 siege artillery pieces, and a total of 16,500 cavalry. The total number is 1,200 less than that of a standard division, but the firepower is stronger and the mobility is more than 1 level stronger. The Jinai Wei is still the size of a regiment. Referring to the organization of the Imperial Guard, it has also been reorganized according to its own positioning, and its total strength has expanded to 8,500 people, 100 more than a standard regiment. The Jinai Wei has 3 infantry battalions and 2 cavalry battalions, plus 2 artillery companies, with 60 field artillery pieces, 20 siege artillery pieces, and 3,000 cavalry. As for the extra 100 people, although the Jinai Wei is only the size of a regiment, it is a separate unit, and must have its own headquarters, the Jinai Wei Command. The Jinai Wei Command is of course different from the regiment headquarters of the standard regiment according to its duties. The headquarters of the Imperial Guards was set up in the same way as the standard division, with 1,500 people. The reason why there was no change was that the functions of the division headquarters of the standard division were already perfect enough, so there was no need to set up another one. After all, a division is incomparable to a regiment. When all the discussions were settled, Yang Song calculated again, not counting the navy, including his direct Imperial Guards and Jinai Wei, the total strength of the Zaire army had reached 230,800 people. Is this number reasonable? Yang Song was secretly satisfied. Like before, when the war started, the enemy army was hundreds of thousands or hundreds of thousands, and his side was only tens of thousands. This was not like the style he knew. 230,000 troops, all equipped with hot weapons, looked around Zaire again, and they were invincible. Of course, this had to wait until the reorganization of the entire army was completed. Chapter 362 Causes and Consequences. Lurk and Li Jing walked out of the palace together. Just as they left the gate and were about to leave, Lurk stopped Li Jing and bowed, saying, "General Li, please stay." "What's the matter, military advisor?" Li Jing stopped, turned around and clasped his fists in return, his face full of confusion. He didn't know what Lurk wanted to say to him by stopping him. Lurk took 2 steps towards Li Jing, looked around, and saw that there were no outsiders near the palace. He said apologetically, "General Li, I hope you won't blame me for what happened in the king's study just now. I also have my own difficulties." When Li Jing heard that Lurk was talking about the matter that made him take responsibility in front of Yang Song a few hours ago, he didn't blame him, nor did he say he didn't blame him. He just asked, "Difficulties? What difficulties?" Alas. Lurk first sighed heavily, looked in the direction of the palace, then turned his head to look at Li Jing sincerely, and replied sincerely, "General Li, you don't know, I really have my own difficulties." Helpless. Li Jing didn't ask this question, but he had already clearly written the doubt on his face. Lurk explained, "Although I'm the military advisor of the country, and the king has also ordered me to speak freely, the general knows how unpredictable people's hearts are. I acted this way, just to report to the king something that cannot be said openly." Li Jing heard Lurk's last sentence, and then he realized that the other party was acting in his name, but he still asked curiously, "What's the matter?" "Well." Lurk touched his beard, pondered for a moment, put down his hand and said frankly, "General Li, you don't know in the military camp, but now there is a sign of faction among the civil officials of Xia state." Lurk stopped talking at this point, and he believed that Li Jing could understand what he wanted to express. Sure enough, when Li Jing heard this, he was shocked at first, and then he felt it was reasonable. He also knew Lurk's good intentions. It seems that this military advisor of a country is not so easy to be. "Thank you for your hard work, military advisor." Li Jing sighed. He also knew that the kind of factionalism and intrigue among officials was not something that ordinary people could participate in. Logically speaking, Li Jing should be angry about being used by Lurk. But Lurk has made it clear now, and Li Jing is not an emotional person. He knows that it is in his interest to have a good relationship with Lurk. After the conversation, the two of them bowed and left. On the other side, after finishing the discussion, Yang Song called the Deputy Director of the Intelligence Department, the Director of the National Security Bureau in charge of domestic intelligence, Yang Yi. Yang Song ordered, "Yang Yi, go check what the relationship is between Lurk and Li Jing." When Yang Yi first heard Yang Song's call, he was still confused about what it was. After hearing Yang Song's order, although he was very surprised that Yang Song's right-hand man had offended the person in front of him, he still clasped his fists and accepted the order expressionlessly. "Yes, my king, I will go now." "Wait a minute." Yang Song saw Yang Yi, who was about to retreat, and suddenly stopped him and said, "Yang Yi, go and check if there are any disputes or other relationships between other officials. You must find out clearly. You know what I mean, right?" Although Yang Song's words were a little unclear, Yang Yi still understood what he said. Yang Yi turned around and clasped his fists and replied, "My king, I understand." After saying this, Yang Yi turned around and left without saying a word. Yang Song looked at the direction where Yang Yi left and thought, "I hope I'm not overthinking it." Oh. Now Yang Song finally experienced the fatigue of being a king. Sometimes he really felt exhausted. Xia Kingdom is so big, he has to take care of everything, and he can't ignore it. After Yang Yi left the palace, he returned to the National Security Bureau not far away, called a few confidants and ordered, "The king has ordered that this official investigate the relationship between officials of this country. You go and retrieve all the files of officials of this country and organize them, so that I can report to the king." "Yes, Director." After hearing Yang Yi's words, several confidants thought in their hearts, just like Yang Yi before, they were shocked and confused. Seeing that Yang Yi had no other instructions, a confidant boldly asked, "Director, I don't know what the king means." He actually asked the director to investigate the officials of this country. The confidant knew that he shouldn't ask this question, but he also knew that Yang Song, who had never cared about the private relationship between officials, suddenly investigated, and something extraordinary must have happened. Sure enough, when Yang Yi heard this, he immediately flew into a rage and scolded, "How dare you? How can you presume to guess what the king means? However, after scolding, Yang Yi saw several confidants who were bowing with fists clasped, paused, and whispered, "I don't know, just go and do your work." This was also an answer to his confidant's previous question. After the few people left, Yang Yi personally found the files of Lurk and Li Jing, and carefully checked them. The files recorded the person's experience so far, where he had been, what he had done, and who he had close contact with. Every important person in the Xia Kingdom had a special box to store his files, and the archives room was built extremely solid and secret, and there were special people guarding it. Non-relevant personnel were not allowed to enter. Therefore, after Yang Yi received Yang Song's instructions, he immediately returned to the National Security Bureau to retrieve the files and obtain information from them. There was no need to investigate now. After all, there were so many officials in the Xia Kingdom. If he really wanted to investigate from the beginning, he didn't know when he would have to wait. Yang Yi read for a long time and finally finished reading the files of the two people. As of yesterday, the relationship between Lurk and Li Jing was limited to official business, and they did not have much communication in private. However, this normal information made Yang Yi a little overwhelmed. After all, Yang Song, the king, asked him to investigate the two people, so there must be something wrong. If he found any problems with the two people, it would be fine. He could report to Yang Song, but the current information showed that there was no problem with the two people. How could he report to Yang Song? In the end, there was really no other way. Yang Yi called a confidant and asked him to activate the intelligence network and carefully find out the information about Lurk and Li Jing. He wanted to see what the problem was between the two people. The next morning, the confidant came to report, "Director, the past experiences of Lurk and Li Jing are indeed as recorded in the files. There is no problem, but yesterday after the two left the palace, they talked outside the wall for 13 minutes. I don't know what they talked about, and then they were the same as usual, nothing unusual." After listening to the confidant's report, Yang Yi frowned and thought for a while and asked, "Can you find out what the two talked about yesterday?" "Director, the environment where the two talked yesterday was special. Unless the two are willing to explain in person, otherwise." The confidant didn't say the second half of the sentence, but Yang Yi understood. "What should I do? Should I report to the king like this?" Yang Yi shook his head and asked unwillingly, "How is the investigation of the other officials going? Are there any problems with the two?" "Director, because there are so many people and the files are too detailed, they are still being sorted out, so it will take some time." The confidant thought for a moment after answering, and added, "We have mobilized all our manpower to sort it out, and the speed can't be faster." The confidant's addition made Yang Yi stop what he wanted to say. He just sighed helplessly and waved his hand, saying, "Go and get busy. Hurry up and tell me as soon as you finish sorting it out." Chapter 363 Response Guidance. 3 days later, Yang Yi still hadn't made any breakthroughs in his investigation of Lurk and Li Jing. He looked at the extremely condensed experience of the two people in his hand. No matter how many times he looked at it, Yang Yi still didn't find any problems. Even the so-called intuition told him that there was nothing wrong with the two people. If there was any problem between the two, it was only the secret conversation between the two after they came out of the palace that day that made him sad. Alas, there is no way. I can only go. I hope the king won't blame me. Yang Yi shook his head, walked out of the National Security Hall, and took the two people to Chang'an Street not far away. Chang'an Street, the noble street of Xianqi City, is lined with various government offices or residences of important officials. And the place Yang Yi is going to now is the residence of Lurk and Li Jing. Yang Yi really has no other choice. The only way now is for him to personally ask the two parties. Although this will alarm others, as long as he can complete the task assigned to him by Yang Song, he will not hesitate, even if he alarms the snake. Haha, I wonder what brought Director Yang here? He's really a rare guest. Please take a seat. After being notified and entering the mansion, Yang Yi and Lurk heard each other's hearty laughter as soon as they met. After both parties took their seats as host and guest, Yang Yi clasped his fists and replied, "Military advisor, I'm here to see you for official business, not for any other reason. I hope you will forgive me." "Oh, so it's for official business. Lurk said with a smile. Director Yang, please feel free to ask anything you want to know. I will tell you everything. Thank you, military advisor. Yang Yi clasped his fists in thanks, put down his hands, stared at the other party's expression, and asked, may I ask, military advisor, between 5:45 and 5:58 p.m. on April 30th, the 16th year of Cheyenne Key, that is, the afternoon after the court meeting 4 days ago, what did you talk about outside the palace with General Li Jing after they came out of the palace? I hope you can tell me the truth. Haha, that's how it is. Lurk laughed twice when he heard Yang Yi's question full of interrogation, and quickly became serious amid the other party's frown, and replied in a serious voice, Director Yang, 4 days ago in the afternoon, this military advisor and General Li left the palace, and in the palace. After that, Lurk told the story of what happened outside the palace that afternoon in detail, without hiding a single word. He had nothing to hide. Lurk had just learned that Yang Yi, a member of the National Security Bureau, was visiting him, and he knew that Yang Song must have paid attention to his abnormal behavior that day. He was not unhappy, but on the contrary, he was happy that his own little plan worked. Therefore, how could he hide anything? Yang Yi listened to Lurk's story quietly. Although he was surprised by the other party's cooperation, he still knew what he should do, and what surprised him even more was the content of Lurk's story. So that's it. Thank you for your cooperation, military advisor. Yang Yi knew what he wanted to know, and stood up to say goodbye and leave. Lurk did not try to stop him. He looked at the direction where the other party left, and smiled with satisfaction, as if something in his heart had been put down. But then he thought of something again, and frowned and pondered again. After leaving Lurk's residence, Yang Yi went to Li Jing's residence, but was told that Li Jing was not at home, but had gone to the military department. Then Yang Yi went to the military department without stopping, and said to the guard, please inform them that Yang Yi from the National Security Department wants to see General Li Jing. Not long after the guard entered the gate, Li Jing came out to greet him in person, and invited him into the living room. After greeting each other, Yang Yi explained his purpose to Li Jing again, and Li Jing, like Lurk, did not hide anything. Yang Yi returned to the National Security Bureau, and asked the two men he had been with him, are the two men's confessions consistent? The two looked at each other, nodded and replied, Director, they are consistent. Yang Yi hummed lightly, and then asked, is the time sufficient? Is there any suspicion of collusion in the confessions? Regarding Yang Yi's question, the two men whispered to each other for a while, and then replied, Director, from the confessions of the two men, the conversation time on that day was only 13 minutes, and the two men had no contact afterwards. If there is no other information, what the two men said should be true. Very good. You have worked hard today, go down. Yang Yi was very satisfied with this answer. Now, he finally had something to report. As for whether Lurk and Li Jing had colluded privately, Yang Yi said that everything had been checked out, and there was no collusion at all. Because he sent people to check all the people who the two men could contact in the past few days, even the old woman who bought vegetables was not spared. Afterwards, Yang Yi compiled this information into a book and impatiently delivered it to Yang Song in person. Facing Yang Song, Yang Yi told him what he had done and apologized to Yang Song for his unauthorized actions. Haha, so that's the case. This Lurk. After reading Yang Yi's intelligence, Yang Song asked some more questions. After learning the cause and effect, he couldn't help but laugh and cry. Yang Yi may not know the cause and effect of the matter, but Yang Song knew it, so Yang Song also knew why Lurk did it. Back to the matter at hand, Yang Song was troubled by the connection between the current civil servants of the Xia state. He knew that such a thing would happen sooner or later, but the previous Xia state did not allow these people to perform their primary duties. But now that the Xia state has become stronger, it is also human nature for these officials to have other ideas. After all, the people Yang Song faced were not data or machines, and it was normal for them to have their own ideas. Hey, Yang Song sighed in annoyance, waved to Yang Yi who was still waiting for instructions, and said, no need to check other people, you have worked hard these days, you can go down. What Yang Song will worry about next is what to do. He also needs to deal with the factions of his subordinates and keep this matter under his control. As for why Yang Yi was not allowed to continue investigating, it was because the investigation would be the same, and it would not change. At most, we would know who is with whom, and who is repelling whom. Yang Song wanted to know not these, but to control the overall situation. Since it has already happened, he has to find a way to guide it, not to prohibit it, because prohibition cannot be prohibited. However, how can Yang Song think of how to guide it at the moment? This is a problem that has been a headache for thousands of years in the past world. Finally, Yang Song had no choice but to summon Lurk and ask, "Bo Wen, you actually told me this method, then you should have a plan to deal with it? Your Majesty, I know my crime." Seeing Yang Song asking him so bluntly, Lurk confessed his crime first. Yang Song was a little dissatisfied and said, "Since you know your crime, why don't you make amends quickly?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Lurk answered honestly this time, "Your Majesty, I think there is only one way to balance this." "Balance? What kind of balance?" Yang Song was thoughtful and had some understanding, but it was always unclear, as if there was still a layer of window paper that had not been pierced. "Reply to Your Majesty, officials of this dynasty have their own social relationships, which is human nature." Lurk explained, "What they do is nothing more than fame, wealth, and power, and these are all given by Your Majesty." Hearing Lurk say this, Yang Song finally figured it out. It turned out that this was the root of everything. As the saying goes, the world is bustling, all for profit. The world is bustling, all for profit. Since you form cliques to seek more benefits for yourself, then Yang Song can use benefits to control and guide you. After figuring it all out, Yang Song was completely relieved. After being relieved, he thought of what Lurk did in this matter and was completely convinced by his wisdom. Without offending colleagues and superiors, he was able to discover and deal with problems perfectly and promptly according to his own identity. Such wisdom is not something that everyone can have. Chapter 364. Standing in the present. It was already a bit hot in Xianqi City in early May. The residents changed into light clothes, and all kinds of gorgeous clothes were interwoven on both sides of the bustling streets. In a corner of the inner city residential area, Wanda, who was already grey-haired, was sitting on a bench under the shade of a tree in the courtyard, holding a pot of black low-quality tea in one hand and an unfolded letter in the other. He read it carefully and seriously, as if he was afraid of missing a word or a symbol. This letter was sent back from Gihua City by his only son, Wangan. The letter described Wangan's recent situation, saying that he had become the chief accountant and was in charge of 2 accountants. In the letter, Wangan also said that he met a girl who worked in a bank in Gihua City and was interested in her, but he didn't know what the other party thought. At the end of the letter, Wangan asked Wang Da and his wife to take care of their health, as he was very worried about them in the north. Alas, this kid finally found a partner. He's already 19, almost 20 years old. When I was this age. Wang Da finished reading the letter and carefully put it away. What age? At this time, Wang Da's wife came out of the house wearing an apron and holding a basket of vegetables. While asking casually, she walked to Wang Da, put the basket down and said, "Put down the vegetables." It's the letter sent back by Wangan, saying that he fell in love with a girl in Gihua City in the north. Wang Da said, and raised the letter in his hand to his wife. Wang Da's wife was stunned at first, then she was delighted. She squatted down beside Wang Da, took the letter and unfolded it to read. She didn't care whether she could understand the words or not. She stared at the letter and couldn't take her eyes off it. Really? Did it say, "When you're going to get married? When can I have a grandchild? You haven't even started yet. Why are you so anxious? You can't read. What are you reading?" Wang Da took the letter from his wife, folded it carefully, and put it back in the envelope. Seeing his wife who didn't care about what he said, he continued, "The letter just said that he likes a girl who works in a bank." Then Wang Da and his wife talked about their family matters and some trivial matters in life. When Wang Da was free, he thought of the battle at the northern border last year. It was said that it happened outside Gihua City. When he heard the news, he was worried about Wangan for a long time. He even wanted to ask someone to bring Wangan back. But in the end, Wang Da didn't do it. He was a team leader working for the king, so he couldn't do anything illegal. Besides, he trusted the army of Xiaguo very much. On the other hand, when Wang Da heard the news, the war in the north had basically been pushed out of Penguin City, and he didn't need to do it at all. Now, when he heard that the army was going to recruit soldiers on a large scale again, Wang Da's worries were truly eliminated. Alas, Wang Da sighed again, watching the neighbors around him discussing whose children who had retired from the army were recalled again, and whose children successfully joined the army, which made the others envious. This made Wang Da think of Wangan, who was hundreds of kilometers away in the north. In mid-August, the Xiaguo seemed to be in a sea of fire. The scorching sun was baking the earth mercilessly, but it also made the rice in the farmland mature quickly. In the Shanhaiguan military camp, according to the latest order of the military department, the army was being expanded, especially the 1st Brigade, now the 1st Division, which was the first army to be expanded. Brigade Commander, now Lieutenant General Deking looked at the latest expansion plan. Even though he was always serious, he was now smiling. After all, who would not be happy about getting promoted? Not to mention that the army under his command increased from more than 11,000 to more than 46,500. This several-fold increase in military strength was the reason why Deking was so happy. General, the last batch of new recruits has arrived, with a number of 5,000. At this time, Lu Su walked in, clasped his fists, and reported to Deking, including this group of people, our 1st Division is finally full. Well, thank you for your hard work, Chief of Staff. After listening to Lu Su's report, Deking nodded with satisfaction, and finally asked, what percentage of the new recruits are those who have been recalled? After hearing Deking's question, Lu Su thought for a while, clasped his fists and replied, General, there are less than 1 regiment of new recruits who have served in the military, and the rest are all newly recruited. Less than 1 regiment? Less than 8,000 people. Deking heard that there were only so many new recruits with experience, and asked in disbelief, doesn't the entire army retire 1 brigade every year? Why are there only so few people now? General. Lu Su was also helpless about this. He explained, since the cancellation of the conscript brigade, the number of soldiers retired every year is different. What's more, it has only been a few years. Moreover, not only our 1st Division needs to expand, but the rest of the army also needs to expand. After listening to Lu Su's explanation, Deking finally remembered that he just didn't think about it carefully, because he felt a headache when he thought about so many inexperienced recruits who had to be trained from scratch. Counting the original more than 10,000 elite veterans, experienced soldiers accounted for less than half of the entire division, and the remaining majority of soldiers were all new recruits who knew nothing. How could this not give him a headache? Since the cancellation of the conscript brigade, the military department under the military department is responsible for the training of new recruits. The soldiers who have passed the training are assigned to various armies according to their grades and volunteers. In other words, the 1st Division led by Deking is now full of soldiers with basic skills. Not as bad as he said, but it depends on who they are compared with. If compared with those native soldiers abroad, these soldiers who have walked out of the boot camp after 3 months of training can be regarded as elite, but compared with the original veterans of Xiaguo who have been on the battlefield, there is a big difference. There is no other way, I can only train slowly. Deking thought so, and ordered Lu Su, intensify the training of new soldiers, and make them capable of fighting, as soon as possible. Yes, General. At the end of December, the world north of the Linhai Mountains was covered with snow, which gave the various forces that had been fighting fiercely a break. At this time, Andre Bachman was meeting the Knight Commander Ribieri who had just returned from the battlefield in his castle. Ibi, thank you for your hard work. Andre first comforted him verbally, and then immediately asked about what he cared about most. How is the situation on the battlefield? How long will it take to defeat the kingdom of Falamet? Your Majesty, I led an army of 30,000 and an army of 150,000 composed of the other 4 countries. We have been fighting fiercely with the army of Falamet for more than a year, but the winner has not yet been decided. After answering Andre's question, Ibi looked at Andrew, whose face changed when he heard his words, hesitated for a moment, and still said, Your Majesty, the kingdom of Falamet is still very powerful. I think there is no result in continuing the attack. It is better to withdraw. Andre sighed deeply when he heard this and said in a deep tone, do you think this monarch does not want to withdraw? But this is not something this monarch can decide. IB understood Andre's words, pointed to the south and said, could it be? That's it. Andre replied affirmatively, otherwise, this monarch doesn't have a way to escape like Parker. He is now desperate, and he doesn't even shy away from saying the word escape. Hearing this, IB didn't know what to say. He didn't have any way to rescue the Buckman Kingdom from the current predicament. The only way is to maintain the status quo and exchange the lives of civilians for the continuation of the entire force. But whether it is Andre Orion or the other monarchies, they must know that this is not a long-term solution. But what else can they do? It would be great if the Buckman Kingdom was as powerful as the Zaire Kingdom. This sentence rang in the hearts of the two people at the same time. I don't know when. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365, Looking to the Future. On the 4th day of April in the 17th year of Cheyenne-Ki, the Zaire Kingdom had already entered the initial rainy season. It had been drizzling in Cheyenne-Ki City since early in the morning. Yang Song, along with his family and the important officials of the Zaire Kingdom and their families, dressed in formal attire and holding black umbrellas, walked to the Martyrs Cemetery north of the Cheyenne-Ki River to prepare for the annual memorial ceremony. Nearing 10 o'clock, the heavens seemed to know what was about to happen in this world. The drizzle in the sky gradually stopped, revealing the sky that was particularly blue after being washed by rain. Suddenly, a child of an unknown family member in the crowd, who was waiting silently, shouted, "Look, there's a rainbow." Everyone looked over and saw that a rainbow had appeared in the eastern sky at some point, framed by a few white clouds, which was very eye-catching. Haha, as the saying goes, after the storm there comes a rainbow. Today we encounter this rainbow after the storm. It is just like the rainbow rising from the east, hanging high in the sky and shining among the fields. UNHUI is right. Yang Song heard what ZHUZ said, agreed with it, and then admonished, the present Zaire Kingdom is inseparable from the dedication of the martyrs before our eyes. You must remember that it is because of the sacrifices of the martyrs that we are what we are today. Yes, Your Majesty, we will keep it in mind and will never forget it. The ministers stood in silence and saluted Yang Song. Yang Song nodded and said, of course, I will never forget your contributions. The country of Zaire is what it is today, and I'm what I'm today, thanks to the efforts and assistance of all the capable ministers. Your Majesty is wise. We dare not take credit for it. The ministers were even more moved when they heard this and said in unison, serving the king, I will never regret it even if I die. After that, Yang Song asked Chang Sunsheng, the director of the ceremony hall who was responsible for presiding over the ceremony, Jisheng, is the time up? Reply to Your Majesty, the time has come. Then let's start. Yes, Your Majesty. As the two finished their questions and answers, Chang Sunsheng walked out from behind Yang Song, walked to the side, unfolded the scroll, and began to preside over the memorial ceremony, reciting eulogies, offering 3 animals, burning incense and paying homage. After a whole set of ceremonies, it was already noon. Then in the state banquet hall, Yang Song hosted a banquet for the group. After the lunch, today's memorial ceremony came to an end. Yang Song attached great importance to the sacrificed soldiers. Just as he said to his ministers in the mausoleum, it was because of these soldiers who paid and sacrificed for the country that the Zaire Kingdom, which is so strong now, could be established. Perhaps in the eyes of others, it is the leadership of Yang Song, the monarch and king, that the Zaire Kingdom exists now. However, Yang Song himself knew that, although he might have played a leading role, he still could not do without the wisdom and bravery of various capable people, and more importantly, the support of the people. Yang Song always remembered a sentence, there are many who are righteous, and few who are unrighteous. This is also the reason why he has paid great attention to people's livelihood from the beginning, and he does not want the people to be displaced and live in poverty under his leadership. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste of his life in this world? The next day, Yang Song summoned Liu and Li Jing. After greeting them, he first asked Li Jing, "Pharmacist, how is the army doing now?" "My king, the army has been reorganized for a long time." Li Jing clasped his fists and replied, "After nearly a year of training, we are now able to fight." The ability to fight that Li Jing mentioned does not mean that the army of Xia State really only has the strength to fight, but that the army of Xia State has already formed combat effectiveness and can go to war at any time, but the combat effectiveness has not yet reached its peak, and the army cannot be called elite. Very good. Yang Song nodded and praised, and then asked, "Are the generals capable of leading the army with increased strength?" The reason why Yang Song asked this was because personal ability has its limits. No matter how powerful a general is, the army he can directly command cannot have no upper limit. "Your Majesty, the generals of the three armies are qualified for promotion." Li Jing thought about this question and added cautiously, "The current establishment is already the limit. If there are more, we need to find another way." Li Jing knew what Yang Song meant, and then immediately suggested, "Your Majesty, if you continue to expand the army, I suggest setting up a military command to lead and command each army. If you need to dispatch hundreds of thousands, or even millions of troops, the problem of unified command will become prominent. Otherwise, what would it look like for each army to fight on its own? Since one person is not enough, then form a team." Although Yang Song agreed with this suggestion, he still had some doubts about it, and it was a problem whether it should be set up in this way and how much authority it had. Therefore, Yang Song did not express his opinion immediately. In fact, Li Jing paid attention to this aspect in the reorganization of the division level. The division headquarters established at the division level as a command center responsible for commanding the subordinate regiments. And the regiment is an independent combat unit of the army, which means that a regiment can be sent out alone to perform combat missions. At least a standard regiment has 8,400 soldiers, a cavalry company and an artillery company, so it is no problem to fight against the 10,000 or 20,000 native troops. Therefore, if the army is to be expanded in the future, it only needs to be improved on the existing basis. Li Jing has already thought about it. After Yang Song asked about the situation of the army, he turned to Liu who was waiting quietly on the side and asked, "Bo Wen, now that the deadline of the 10-year plan is coming, where should Xia go in the future?" Yang Song actually asked this question a little too much. After all, he is the king of a country, and the future of Xia is actually in his hands. This problem should be solved by himself. But who made Yang Song really not know where to start? Unify the world? This world is too big, and the goal is too far away at once. It cannot be achieved with existing technology, and is not practical at all. Continue to develop. Looking around, Xia is already invincible. If it continues to develop, Yang Song estimates that he will not even have the heart to conquer in the future, because there will be nothing worth thinking about abroad at that time. Could it be that he will be asked to help the poor at that time? Maybe by then, the only useful thing in foreign countries will be land. However, by then, it will be easier for Xia to get these lands than to get them at hand. It was the first time that Yang Song felt that he had no opponent. Therefore, for a moment, Yang Song thought about it and suddenly found that he didn't know how to lead Xia. Report to the king. Liu was who he was, and he guessed Yang Song's general idea at once, and replied with a cupped hand, "It depends on where the king will lead Xia." Li Jing handed the initiative to Yang Song again. After all, with his identity, some words cannot be said casually, and some attitudes still need to be made. What does Bo Wen mean? Yang Song saw that the other party kicked the ball back to him, and said with some dissatisfaction, "Of course, I want to make Xia stronger and bigger, so that the people can live a better life. The king is wise, and I'm willing to follow him until death." Hearing Yang Song's words, that seemed to be said in vain, Liu and Li Jing were convinced. "Your Majesty," Liu immediately said, "the strength of a country lies in its internal strength in military, technology, economy and other aspects, and in its external strength, in conquering enemy countries and making friends. However, in today's world, our country has no border troubles, and your majesty should start from within. It seems that Lurk has chosen to continue to develop this path. Yang Song sighed in his heart, thinking that it would be fine. Just as he was about to respond, he heard Li Jing speak on the side. Your majesty, I have something to say. Li Jing waited for Yang Song to nod in agreement, and continued, although it is often said that it is a blessing for a country to have no wars, there is also a saying that those who love war will perish, and those who forget war will be in danger. When Yang Song heard what Li Jing said, he asked in some confusion, then what should be considered according to the pharmacist's opinion? Yang Song also wanted to hear Li Jing's opinion. Li Jing clasped his fists and saluted, and replied seriously, My Majesty, in my opinion, it is better for your majesty to use the useless barbarians from abroad to train soldiers, while developing your own country. Chapter 366 Choosing a Target. I second the motion. As soon as Li Jing finished speaking, Lurk seconded the motion, and continued in Yang Song's questioning eyes, as General Li said, if the army does not get involved in war for a long time, it is not a good thing. It is just the right time to take advantage of the training, to nibble at the land outside the pass, to expand the territory of our country. Hearing what the two said, the two people in front of him did not regard the people of this world as human beings at all. However, the suggestions of these two people really touched Yang Song's heart. This is really a way to have the best of both worlds, but it is a bit cruel for the people of this world. But who made them? And the Zaya people two different races? They can't even assimilate, so don't blame Yang Song for being cruel. However, when it comes to training troops, Yang Song suddenly thought of the vassal army formed by the Zaya kingdom, and composed of indigenous young and strong men. So he asked, Pharmacist, how is the vassal army? Reporting to the king, the vassal army has 100,000 people, divided into 10 teams of 10,000 people, and 10 loyal people are selected from the leaders of the original production teams, to serve as captains of 10,000 men. Each captain of 10,000 men has 10 captains of 1,000 men, and each captain of 1,000 men has 10 centurions. The captain of 10,000 men and his subordinate officers only have the right to command the army. They do not have the power to fight, mobilize troops, and command. In wartime, they will be divided into divisions and regiments according to their actual situation, and the division commanders and regiment commanders will command the operation specifically. The vassal army is stationed outside Shanhaiguan and inside Penguin City, and they train every day. According to the king's order, there are only two types of soldiers, sword and shield soldiers and spear soldiers, and the only protective equipment is cloth armor. Yang Song's question was a bit vague. Li Jing didn't know what aspect Yang Song was asking about, so he had to explain it from all aspects. After listening to Li Jing's detailed account, Yang Song asked, how strong is the vassal army? When Li Jing heard this clear question, he immediately clasped his fists and replied, Your Majesty, the vassal army's combat effectiveness is quite low due to its weapons and equipment, but compared with the foreign countries outside the Great Wall, a vassal army of 10,000 people can defeat twice as many enemies. Twice? Yang Song repeated the number secretly, and asked in confusion, the vassal army has no bows and crossbows, no armor, and no cavalry. Why is its combat effectiveness so impressive? It's no wonder that Yang Song would have this question. After all, the 100,000 vassal army formed by the Zaya kingdom had neither long-range weapons, cavalry, nor protective gear. They only had simple swords and shields, spears, and a set of uniform military uniforms. Even the organization was so simple, but they could actually fight against twice the number of armies in this world. This was a bit incredible. Li Jing replied, Your Majesty, first, the training of the vassal army is carried out according to the previous training of our country. When fighting, they pay attention to battle formations, not scattered soldiers. Second, although the weapons and equipment of the vassal army are simple, they are not crude, and they are all used by our country's soldiers. At this point, Li Jing saw that Yang Song listened carefully, so he continued. Third, although the vassal army is aboriginal barbarians, they are all young and strong. In addition, they have worked in our country for many years, and have never lacked food and clothing. Their physique is not much worse than that of our country's soldiers. Finally, the command of the vassal army is commanded by our country's generals, and they are not fighting alone. When necessary, they can also have fire support. I see. After listening to Li Jing's explanation again, Yang Song also solved his inner doubts. At this time, Lurk interrupted with a simple sentence, "Your Majesty, there are no aboriginal laborers in our country." Yang Song didn't have much feeling when he heard this seemingly simple sentence, but it actually contained a lot of information. He just nodded to show that he knew. When Li Jing reported to Yang Song just now, he said that the vassal army only had 100,000 soldiers, but the number of natives in Xia State in the past was more than that. Where did the rest of the people go? Needless to say, it would not be as simple as letting them go out of the pass. Yang Song was about to order Li Jing to carry out the training plan, but suddenly thought that there were no hostile forces in the neighboring countries of Xia State now. Even if there was a few limit country, it was reserved by Yang Song and others to consume the number of natives outside the pass. Therefore, Yang Song could not find a target for training soldiers now, which made him feel a little embarrassed. After a long time, there was no condition for the implementation of this training plan. Fortunately, Yang Song reacted and did not let Li Jing and Lurk see anything. Break the deadlock outside the pass, let Xia State personally go down, regardless of the enemy, and us to launch an attack together? This is not possible. Yang Song shook his head secretly. Xia State spent a lot of effort and finally brought about the current scene. It is impossible to give up or only help the vassal state and only attack Philomet. It is not possible either. The reason was that Yang Song did not want to break the deadlock outside the Great Wall, which was not good for the Xia Kingdom. However, after thinking for a long time, he still could not figure out how to solve this problem. He could only ask for help from Lurk, the military advisor, and asked, "Bo Wen, in your opinion, this training target?" "Your Majesty, it depends on whether your Majesty chooses to go nearby or far away." Lurk thought for a while, bowed and replied, "The nearby ones should be the forces around the vassal states, and the far ones can be conquered by sea thousands of miles away." Lurk Bo Wen is Lurk Bo Wen. From a simple question from Yang Song, he knew what problem Yang Song encountered and gave a solution in time. Oh. Yang Song didn't expect Lurk to have so many choices and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Is it better to go nearby or farther away?" Lurk didn't comment on Yang Song's question, but just replying to the king, "If we go nearby, we can get support from the vassal states, which is convenient for marching and less expensive. After training, we can also open up a road for expansion for the vassal states, and many years later, the current stalemate will be broken." Yang Song listened and thought, and nodded frequently to what Lurk said, agreeing very much. Just as Lurk said, if we go by land to train troops, the nearest vassal states and Philomet Kingdom are not good, then we can go a little further away and conduct military operations against other forces around the vassal states. However, after the successive attacks by the Xia Kingdom, these forces will inevitably weaken, allowing the vassal states of the Xia Kingdom to expand their strength effortless, and many years later, Philomet Kingdom will definitely be destroyed. Lurk continued, "The farthest is the open sea, and the navy will definitely be involved. The navy has also been trained, but because of this, it is very expensive and has many targets, which is not conducive to marching. In addition to expanding the influence of the country, there are no other benefits." In short, Lurk talked for a long time, but still did not answer the method Yang Song said. He just analyzed the pros and cons of the two options and let Yang Song, the king of a country, choose for himself. Lurk's political mind is lamentable. In this case, Li Jing obeys. Yang Song thought for a long time and made a decision. Without hesitation, he immediately ordered, "I order you to lead the 1st Division, the 2nd Division and the Cavalry Division, and all the vassal troops, to implement the training plan against various foreign forces. Send a message to Li Bao, order him to lead the entire navy to implement the plan. Target all foreign countries along the coast." Yang Song chose to carry out two plans at the same time. Finally, Yang Song stood up, raised his hands high, and shouted, "Announce to foreign countries that they are not my subordinates and are all my enemies. I will obey the king's order. The king is wise. Long live the Xia Kingdom. Chapter 367 to groups. The reason why Yang Song chose to launch the training plan from both far and near directions at the same time was because Liug's words about letting the Navy participate in it gave him an idea. He also thought that the training plan was a long-term plan. Unlike war, the goal is to win as soon as possible, and it emphasizes frequent and low-intensity military operations. Therefore, Xia State can afford this expenditure. So Yang Song decided to launch the plan from two directions at the same time. However, the disadvantages are also clearly stated. The burden of two-line operations and the pressure of logistics have also increased exponentially. Fortunately, it is still the same. This cannot be completed overnight. In this training plan, Yang Song did not dispatch the two armies of the City Guard and the Imperial Guard because Xia State still had to retain a certain number of troops to defend the border. However, in order to increase some land warfare forces on the sea route, Yang Song still drew a regiment from the Imperial Guard and handed it over to Li Bao for command. In addition, even if the training is carried out, it is not a rush, but the various armies are sent to the battlefield in batches and rotations for experience. Maybe it was necessary to dispatch heavy troops when encountering obstacles from the enemy at the beginning, but after that it was pure training. Li Bao was also prepared for Xia Guo's actions, but when he really received the order, he was still very excited and a little surprised in the excitement. He didn't expect that Yang Song would let him be the commander of the troops this time. But after thinking about it for a while, Li Bao figured it out. After all, he knew the things on the sea best. In addition, his training along the way was along the coast, and no one else could be the commander of the way except him. Li Bao's current duties are to be in charge of the Naval Academy and also serve as the commander of the Defense Fleet. But at this time, he received an order, and he had to put aside the affairs of the Academy and concentrate on being the commander of the way. Fortunately, the Naval Academy has been on the right track and he doesn't need to worry about it anymore. Order the Defense Fleet and the Exploration Fleet to prepare for going to sea. After receiving the order, Li Bao immediately gave an order to the guards behind him. Yes, General. The guards clasped their fists and saluted, and then left to pass on the order. Not long after, Zhao Cheng came to the door. Zhao Cheng came here to follow Yang Song's order to hand over a regiment of the Imperial Guard to the Navy. Although it was only a secondment, Zhao Cheng was still a little unhappy. After the two greeted each other, Zhao Cheng said first, General Li, the 1st Regiment of the Imperial Guard is handed over to you. It's up to the General from now on. General Zhao, that's serious. Li Bao didn't dare to be careless with Zhao Cheng. Although his rank was one level higher than the other party was a close person around the great King Yang Song. How could he dare to be careless? Li Bao's previous rank of Major General was also promoted to Lieutenant General along with the reorganization of the army. After all, it was impossible for only the army to be promoted, and not the navy. King Yang Song still had to be fair, and not biased towards one side. After Zhao Cheng received the army, he asked curiously, General Li, do you have any plans for this sea route? Zhao Cheng was trying to find out Li Bao's purpose and plan. Although this was a bit beyond his authority, there was still a regiment of the Imperial Guards on the sea route, so he still had some authority. General Zhao, this sea route will follow the king's will. The main purpose of this expedition is to train the troops, and the second is to conquer those who are not obedient. Li Bao thought about it and decided to give Zhao Wu an answer. General Zhao, don't worry, I will not disappoint the king on this trip, and these two goals will definitely be achieved. That's good. Although Zhao Wu did not ask what he wanted to know, he got the other party's promise on this trip, so it was not a wasted trip. In fact, when Zhao Wu heard that part of the Imperial Guards had to obey the command of the naval generals at the beginning, he was still a little dissatisfied. But after hearing what Li Bao said just now, he had a different impression of the other party. The generals of the Xia Kingdom actually had two factions. One faction was Deking, Lu Su, Li Bao and others, who either had their own qualifications for promotion, military, or were highly appreciated by Yang Song as soon as they arrived, such as Huo Kubeng and Li Jing. The other faction was Yan Ren, Zhang Wei, Zhao Wu, who had been with Yang Song for a long time and were promoted step by step with their military merits and qualifications. One faction believed that the other party had no merit, and the other faction looked down on the other party's talents. Although the two factions did not reach the point of being incompatible due to the efforts of Yang Song and Li Jing, they still disliked each other to some extent. Therefore, when Zhao Wu learned that the Imperial Guards wanted to borrow a regiment of troops to Li Bao, he was somewhat unhappy, but after a brief contact, he had to admire Li Bao's talents in his heart. General Zhao. Just as Li Bao and Zhao Wu were talking, a messenger shouted outside the door, "Report. Report to the general." General Li asked the general to go to the military department. The messenger brought Li Jing's summons. Li Bao stopped talking with Zhao Wu and replied to the messenger, "Okay, I will go right away." After the messenger left, Li Bao smiled apologetically at Zhao Wu and said, "Since General Li has summoned you now, it is probably to discuss the dispatch of troops. General Zhao, I have military orders, so I will not see you off." Li Bao was seeing him off. It was completely fine to call Zhao Wu a guest. After all, except for a regiment of guards seconded by the navy, there was basically nothing for Zhao Wu to do in this expedition. Meet General Li. After arriving at the military department, Li Bao was still a little surprised to see all the generals there. After the greetings, Li Bao immediately said, "General Li, I wonder what important matter is that you have summoned me and others here?" Li Jing chuckled twice and said, "Haha, General Li Bao, don't worry, please take a seat first." After taking a seat, Li Jing saw that everyone was looking at him. His face changed, and he said seriously, "I believe you have all received the king's order." After all the generals nodded in agreement, Li Jing continued, "In that case, this general will not repeat it, and will only talk about the key points. Everyone, this military expedition is different from the past. On the one hand, it is to conduct actual combat training for the newly recruited soldiers of our country, and on the other hand, it is to conquer the rebellious foreign countries." When Li Jing said this, his face was unusually serious. Although the two have their priorities, what I want to say is that the two must be achieved. When the generals present heard Li Jing's words, which were not an order, but better than an order, they all stood up and clasped their fists and said, "General, you are wise. I obey your orders." The reason why Li Jing summoned the generals of the navy and land armies to discuss the matter was that in addition to being the commander-in-chief of the land army, he was also the deputy director of the military department. He had to make strategic deployments before the two armies set out. Chapter 368. Before the expedition. As soon as Li Jing finished speaking, Deking stood up and clasped his fists, saying, "General, what are your instructions? Please give me your orders. I will obey you." Li Jing glanced at Deking and didn't say much. He just asked him to sit down first, and then he continued, "Soon the king will send envoys to inform all the foreign countries outside the Great Wall and ask them to pay tribute. I believe that the foreign countries will not obey. Then it will be the time for us to be loyal to the country and the king. Therefore, during this period, we must be well prepared, check for loopholes, and make up for them, and formulate military strategies, so that we can be ready to obey the king's orders, and prepare to go to war at any time. Although Yang Song's order has been issued now, there is still a rule for when and how to send troops. Even if we want to train troops, we must have a legitimate reason to go out. Yes, I will obey your order, and wait for your order at any time." The generals accepted the order. "Very good." Li Jing continued, "General Li Bao will command the sea route. I will not say much. Let's discuss the land route first." "General, that's too serious." Upon hearing this, Li Bao immediately said, "I'm the commander of the sea route, because of your kindness. However, you are the chief officer of the military department. If you have any instructions, I will follow your instructions." Li Jing understood what Li Bao meant. It was as if Li Bao knew that Li Jing's words were just a way to avoid suspicion. He listened to Li Jing because of his position. If Li Jing really had something wrong, he would follow his instructions, but he would also report to Yang Song for a decision. General Li Bao is too modest. General Li Bao is the authority on matters at sea. I will not interfere. Li Jing was right. This was also the reason why Yang Song asked Li Bao to be the commander of the sea route. After Li Jing talked with Li Bao for a few words, he returned to the main topic and said to Generals Deking, Huokubeng and others, this general believes that as for the land, once the king issues the order to go on the expedition, we must do our best in the first expedition. The 1st Division, the 2nd Division and the Cavalry Division will attack together and deal devastating blows to each target. As Li Jing spoke, he stood up and pointed to the locations around the northern vassal states on the map hanging on the wall behind him. He continued, after reducing the combat effectiveness of each state, do not occupy the city, withdraw the troops back to the interior, and then let the divisions and regiments take turns to attack, launching rotation wars without stopping until all the foreign states surrender. After Li Jing finished talking about the tactics he had come up with, and saw that everyone was thinking about his tactics, he explained, the reason why we put all our efforts into the first battle is, first, to train the troops and let the soldiers experience what real group combat is, and second, to deter the enemy and reduce its combat effectiveness to the maximum. After seeing that the soldiers seemed to have understood something as he explained, Li Jing continued to explain, and withdrawing the troops back to the country is not to force the enemy too much and make them surrender easily, and there are also logistical cost considerations. Regardless of other people's thoughts, Li Jing has explained this, and he must finish it. Finally, each division and regiment will take turns to fight, which is also for training. This will test the endurance and independent combat capabilities of the soldiers. Of course, it is also to force the foreign states to surrender in the end. Li Jing had finished his explanation and was now waiting for the opinions of the other generals. If not, the land attack would be decided. Of course, this was only a strategic deployment. The specific battles and tactics would be based on local conditions and opportunities. Li Jing had already said this, so how could the other generals have any opinions? Moreover, Deking, Lu Su and others also agreed. Even Huokubeng, who was a bit of an exception, couldn't think of a better way at this moment. With the approval of the generals, although Li Jing didn't express anything, he was still very satisfied in his heart. He then looked at Li Bao and said, General Li Bao, this is the land route. I wonder if this plan of mine can provide some help to the general? General Li, what are you talking about? I admire you. Li Bao admired Li Jing from the bottom of his heart, admired his strategy, and admired his comprehensive thinking. Even the cost of using troops was taken into consideration. What he admired more was that Li Jing's strategy was simply flawless. No matter from which direction, he couldn't think of any omissions. Li Bao clasped his fists and said, I admire you, then continued, the general's strategy is simple but extraordinary, practical and not empty. I have learned exactly that. For me, this strategy is more than just help. Haha, General Li Bao, that's a high praise. Hearing Li Bao's heartfelt praise, Li Jing couldn't help but touch his beard and said with a smile, I have lived up to the king's trust by being able to provide help to General Li Bao. After laughing, Li Jing asked Li Bao, then I wonder if General Li Bao would be convenient to talk to me and the generals about the strategy of sending troops by sea. Li Jing asked this because he was actually fulfilling his duty. His current position is very sensitive. He must perform his duties conscientiously and not interfere too much. He must grasp the degree. Otherwise, even if he really didn't do what he wanted, even if Yang Song didn't say it openly, the others would have other opinions. General, your situation is really serious. Hearing Li Jing's question, Li Bao thought for a moment and replied, after learning from the general's strategy, I also have a strategy. Please share it with General Li and other generals. Just say it. Li Jing waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to worry, and they could speak freely. Li Bao clasped his fists and saluted all the generals present. Then he walked to the map and pointed to the northern coastline and said, my strategy is different from General Li's strategy. In the curious and expectant eyes of Li Jing and others, Li Bao explained, naval warfare is different from land warfare. The entire army relies on warships, and the same is true for sending out a small number of troops. Li Jing and others heard what Li Bao said, and they all nodded in agreement. Li Bao continued, when facing the enemy, warships must take the first place, followed by land warfare. Even so, coastal land warfare cannot do without warships as support. But the foreign countries along the northern coast have no ships that can fight against us. Therefore, Li Bao talked about the reasons for a long time before getting to the point. He raised his voice and spoke faster. The sea routes will be dispersed from the beginning, bombarding the coastal cities, waiting for their defenses to collapse, and then landing on the beach and fighting them by land. After winning, destroy the coastal cities and force the coastal enemies to surrender. Li Bao finished speaking the strategy he thought of in one breath. Although some places still need to be improved, the overall strategy will not change. There are many differences between his strategy and Li Jing's. For example, he did not fight all in the first battle and then withdraw troops for rotation. His strategy was to do his best from the beginning, divide the ships into multiple routes, concentrate the land combat forces in one place, and train troops in various coastal areas. The reason for this is mostly due to different combat environments. The overall idea is still the same, and the purpose is to complete the surrender while training. PS. Sorry, the chapter number of the previous chapter is wrong. It should be chapter 157. There is no problem with the content, and it does not affect reading. Modified. Chapter 369. Surrender of Foreign Nations. Viscount Ilibrim looked at the legendary Zaya countryman in the hall and heard the so-called declaration of submission read out by the other party, which made all 6 viscounts and 3 baronies of the Ili alliance, including him, submit to Zaya and become one of Zaya's vassal states. After hearing this declaration, Ili felt a little funny in his heart. He didn't expect that the Zaya country, which was 300 or 400 kilometers away, actually wanted to surrender to them. Even if Zaya was very powerful and even the Flamet country that they feared was defeated, it was a bit unrealistic to be so far away. After the Zaya envoy finished his announcement, he saw that Yili did not respond and could not help but ask, "Your Excellency, are you willing to bring Yili to surrender to our country?" Surrender? Yili came to his senses, looked at the Zaya envoy in the hall and replied decisively, "Is the monarch of your Zaya country drunk? It is impossible for me to surrender." Bold. When the Zaya envoy heard that the barbarian leader in front of him actually spoke rudely to the king of Zaya, he scolded, "The barbarians are really rude people. How dare you speak rudely to the king of Zaya? Do you think your life is too long?" The envoys from Zaya state to various forces knew, before they went on the mission, that this was not a good job, and they were mentally prepared and had long put their own safety aside. Therefore, how could they bear it when they heard the other party insulting their king? "You are the one who is so bold." Yili was furious when he heard this and shouted, "This lord sees that you don't want to live now. Come on, take him out and kill him." Wait a minute. A voice suddenly sounded, stopping the guard from entering the door, and also stopped the Zaya envoy from speaking. Yili looked over and saw that it was his top think tank, Bernie Klee, who was stopping him. So he turned his head to look at Bernie, waiting for his explanation. "Lord, calm down." Bernie stood out of the queue, saluted Yili, and then said, "When two parties are fighting, envoys will not be killed. If we kill the Zaya envoy like this, it will affect the honor of the Lord." Yili calmed down at this time, knowing that what Bernie said was right, but his words had already been said, and it was not easy to take them back. Yili thought about it and said to the Zaya envoy, "You are lucky. Someone is pleading for you. Get out of this territory for this lord." Seeing this, the Zaya envoy also knew that it was impossible to do anything. "I can leave on my own." The Zaya envoy shook off the guard's arms, straightened his clothes, and said expressionlessly, "Since your lordship has made a decision, I hope you won't regret it later. Goodbye." After saying this, the Zaya envoy bowed to Yili without saying a word, turned around and left the castle hall with his head held high, and then returned to Zaya without stopping to report, leaving the notice scroll in the center of Yili's castle hall. After the Zaya envoy left, Bernie picked up the notice scroll that fell in the middle of the hall. He lowered his head to look at the exquisite and silky scroll, raised his head, and said to Yili, "Please inform the other lords of the alliance to prepare." "Why did you pick it up?" Yili asked casually. After hearing Bernie's words, he asked again in confusion, "Prepare? Prepare for what? Do you think Zaya will really send troops?" At the end of the question, Yili was very surprised, and he himself could not believe his speculation. "Yes, my lord." Bernie confirmed Yili's guess with a somewhat grim expression, and then continued, "The army of Zaya country is extremely powerful. Even a strong country like Falamit was easily defeated by Zaya country's army. Even now they dare not take action against Zaya country's so-called vassal states. As Bernie spoke, he suddenly thought of something, and then added, the reason why our yearly alliance has been able to be so idle recently is actually thanks to Zaya country. Bernie, do you think too highly of Zaya country? Or are you afraid? Yearly did not comment on Bernie's words. He just looked at his subordinate who had always been fearless. He found that the other party actually had a hint of fear. When Bernie heard this, he was shocked. He didn't expect that his fear of Xiago would be revealed. He took a deep breath and calmed down. Then he replied, my lord, to be honest, I'm really a little scared. As soon as Bernie finished speaking, there was a moment of silence in the castle hall, followed by a commotion. Many dignitaries looked at Bernie in surprise. They didn't expect Bernie to admit it. Quiet. Yili was also surprised. After he loudly asked everyone in the hall to quiet down, he turned to Bernie and asked, Xiago is 300 or 400 kilometers away from here. You don't have to be so afraid, right? My lord, please look. Bernie did not answer Yili's question immediately, but first handed the notice scroll left by the Xiago envoy to the other party. Yili took the scroll with doubts. Seeing Bernie's expression asking him to check it, he lowered his head and looked at the scroll. You really don't know until you see it. Just now, the scroll was in the hands of the Zaya country's envoy, but now that it is in his own hands, Yili found that this scroll is really extraordinary. Whether it is the workmanship, the material, or even the pattern on it, Yili said that he had never seen such a thing before. If he didn't know that this was a notice of surrender from the Zaya country, he would have wanted to take this scroll for himself and collect it as a treasure. This. Yili touched the scroll and looked up at Bernie. He didn't know what to say for a long time. Such a treasure was actually only used by the Zaya country to send messages. How rich must this Zaya country be? That's right. Bernie nodded firmly and then said, Lord, this thing alone shows how powerful Zaya is. Moreover, if Philomet can attack us, it is not impossible that Zaya, which is even more powerful, can attack us. If I had known earlier, then what should I do? Hearing Bernie's words, Ellie panicked immediately. He didn't even pay attention to the hall, which was also in a panic. He just looked at Bernie for help, hoping that his own think tank would give him hope. Hey. Bernie sighed in his heart and gave advice in Ella's expectant eyes. Lord, even if we know how powerful Zaya is, we can't surrender before fighting. Now all we can do is to prepare ourselves, hoping that we can resist the Zaya army coming from afar. Just like Bernie said, even if he knew, he couldn't surrender before fighting. After hearing this, Yili collapsed on the throne, as if he had lost his strength, and helplessly ordered, this is the only way. Bernie, go contact other territories and let them prepare. Yili United has Bernie Klee, so it knows that Zaya's announcement is not as simple as it sounds, but the other forces do not have such a person, and they do not take Zaya's surrender announcement seriously. When the envoy sent by Zaya's etiquette department arrived at the various forces and read Zaya's announcement to their leaders, as expected, no force chose to surrender. Maybe when Zaya's army comes to the door, we will know that Zaya will not be so frivolous. At the beginning, Yang Song and others decided to implement the military training plan on the grounds of ruling foreign countries, because they calculated that the forces in the north would not surrender easily. From the perspective of Zaya, there must be a reason to send troops, and it is impossible to send troops directly without any reason. Even if people in this world think it is not necessary, this is not the style of Zaya, and Yang Song has to give an explanation to the people of Zaya. Chapter 372 Paths. Your Majesty, Chang San Sheng reported to Yang Song at the court meeting. All the envoys who went out have returned, and no one from the foreign countries outside the Great Wall has pledged his loyalty. Although Yang Song had known the result for a long time, he was still very unhappy after hearing Chang San Sheng's report. How long has it been since he felt rejected? It's been a long time. The ignorant are really fearless. Yang Song sneered and said, since you are so ignorant, don't blame me for being ruthless. Li, I have done it, and now it's time to send troops. Yang Song immediately ordered the two generals of the military department, Li Jing, Li Bao, listen to your orders. Everything goes according to plan. Yes, I obey your orders. Li Jing and Li Bao heard that the official order to send troops was finally issued, walked out of the queue, and solemnly accepted the order. The civil officials had long known about Yang Song's decision to send troops, and they actually supported, or should be said to be in great agreement with, the conquest of the northern indigenous foreign countries. Privately, the families of the civil officials have various industries, and they can also enjoy the benefits brought by the expansion of the Xia kingdom. Publicly, the civil officials are also willing to see the strength of the Xia kingdom. Therefore, whether it is for public or private reasons, the civil officials support this expedition, not to mention the temptation of leaving a name in history ahead. As for worrying about whether the Xia kingdom will win, from the beginning of 3000 residents to now, the Xia kingdom has never lost even once. Everyone, you have heard the king's order, it's time. After the court meeting, in the meeting room of the military department, Li Jing looked at many generals including Li Bao, and asked seriously, do you have any questions? Seeing that no one answered, Li Jing first looked at Yang Ren of the Hubao Hall and asked, Director Yang Ren, is the logistics ready? General, food, ammunition, carriages, weapons and other items are ready. Yang Ren stood up and clasped his fists and replied, General, don't worry, our country has sufficient food and countless ammunition, so you will have no worries. That's good. Li Jing certainly knew all this, and asking more at this time was just a matter of routine. He then asked Yang Xin of the military hall who was responsible for recruiting militia, Director Yang Xin, how is the recruitment of militia going? General. Yang Xin also stood up and clasped his fists and replied, for this expedition, the Hubao Hall will recruit 100,000 militiamen in accordance with the king's order to ensure that the logistics have enough manpower. In addition, Yang Xin thought for a moment and then said, in addition, on the land side, through the administrative department and the Hall of Rights, we have issued an order to the 5 vassal states outside the Great Wall, asking them to provide 100,000 young and strong laborers for their country, and they have received a reply of compliance. After receiving the order from Xia, the 5 vassal states of Xia immediately said that they would accept the order. Of course, they had no choice but to accept the order. In order to ensure that there were 100,000 young and strong laborers, they had no choice but to send troops. As for the food and fodder for these 100,000 laborers, of course, they were the vassal states themselves. Li Jing got two satisfactory answers. After nodding to show that he knew, he instructed Zhang Wei, who was in charge of the military guard hall. In addition to the king's personal army, there is only General Zhang's city guard army for this expedition. General Zhang must guard Shanhaiguan and Gihua city to ensure that the country is not lost. Yes, General. Zhang Wei knew how heavy his task was. He answered seriously and concisely, as long as the people are in the city will be there. Li Jing nodded, and then instructed, in case of emergency, don't be stubborn. Don't hesitate when you need help from the king. Yang Song's personal army was generally not included in the calculations of Li Jing and others, but in times of crisis, Yang Song's personal guards were the reserve force, just like the army that was sent to the navy this time. After all, this time, Xia state can be regarded as a large army. Not counting the navy, there are 3 divisions, 100,000 vassal troops, and 100,000 militiamen, a total of more than 300,000. This is the first time that Xia state has sent more than 100,000 troops. Afterwards, Li Jing gave instructions to Bao Jie of the Political and Legal Affairs Department, Yu Shu of the Military Affairs Department, and Zuan Wei of the Equipment Department, asking them to perform their duties and take charge of their respective departments to ensure that there were no omissions or mistakes in military law, morale, ideology, military exploits, pensions, weapons, etc. Li Jing saw that all the departments were ready, looked at the other generals, and said sternly, report to each division. General, the 1st division is ready. Deking stood up first, and reported with a fist, please give the order, General. General, the 2nd division is ready. Then Yan Ren also stood up, and reported the preparations of the 2nd division. General, the cavalry division is ready. Then Hu Okubang also stood up, and asked for battle while reporting. The cavalry division is willing to be the vanguard. It can only be said that Hu Okubang is worthy of being Hu Okubang. Li Bao also stood up and reported with a fist. General Li, the Navy is also ready and can go overseas at any time. Well, very good. Seeing that all the generals had finished reporting, Li Jing also stood up and faced everyone, saying loudly, according to the king's order, the whole army will go out tomorrow. I obey your order. This expedition, the number of troops used in the early stage was unprecedented. It was a challenge for the generals, and for the Xia kingdom. At 9 o'clock the next morning, after the expedition ceremony presided over by Li Jing, and witnessed by Yang Song, the army officially set out. Li Jing led the 1st Division, the 2nd Division, and a small part of the cavalry division who participated in the expedition ceremony to the place where the army assembled Shanhaiguan. Afterwards, they will join the rest of the large troops and vassal troops in Penguin City and embark on the journey to the north under the logistical guarantee of 100,000 militiamen. Li Bao led the 1st Regiment of the Imperial Guards to the north from the naval port on a transport ship, met the naval fleet at Linhai port, and went to the overseas expedition together. Because there has been no threat at sea, Xia State has maintained its original status, with only one exploration fleet and one defense fleet, a total of 36 large and small combat warships, and 6 supply ships. There are 7,400 direct combat personnel. It is also, because there is no threat at sea, that the 55 fleet originally planned for attack only exists on paper. The remaining construction capacity has all been replaced with large and small transport ships. Transport ships are used for business in peacetime, and for transporting troops in wartime. No matter how they are built, they will not be useless, not to mention that when sending troops to Baxter State by sea before, the shortcomings of Xia State's insufficient maritime transport capacity were revealed. Of course, now, maritime transport capacity is no longer a constraint on Xia State's overseas deployment. Your subjects and others are here to see the king. Taking advantage of the time before the army set off, Yang Song called Liug and Li Jing to him. No need to be so polite. Yang Song looked at the army lining up to set off in the open space in front of the hall, and ordered to the two of them, "Pharmacist, there is no trivial matter in war. At this point, I can only wish you a triumphant return." "Thank you, my king." Li Jing bowed and clasped his fists, solemnly promising, "We will win this battle." "Very good." Yang Song then looked at Liug and also ordered, "Bo Wen, as the chief of staff, you will accompany the army this time. You must assist the pharmacist well." "Yes, my king." Liug also solemnly promised, "Your Majesty and I have already decided the victory in the temple. Please rest assured and wait for good news from me." Yang Song got the promise from the two and completely put aside the worry of unknown source in his heart. "Then I will wait for your return at the celebration banquet." In fact, from Yang Song's attitude, it can be seen that the land route is the main direction of this expedition, and it is also the route with the most variables. It's not that the sea route is not important, but because of the limitations of the sea, the depth of attack, selectable targets, upper limit of troops, post-victory control, cost, target, etc., the sea route cannot be the main attack direction this time. Yang Song, dressed in gorgeous clothes, stood in front of the hall, watching the last team disappear in the distance. He sincerely hoped that all the soldiers would return, although this was just his extravagant hope. Yang Song said to himself in his heart, "It's not that Yang Song likes killing, but this is how the world is. Survival of the fittest, the struggle for survival, all for the future of Xia." Chapter 371 The beginning of change. The army went out to fight, and not only the military department was busy, but other departments were also very busy. The Foreign Affairs Office of the Intelligence Department had already launched a foreign intelligence network when it decided to send troops to ensure that the army could know itself and the enemy. The Zhuangzhengyuan was the same. It had been promoting the intention of ruling the people of Xia State for a long time. After the news of foreign countries refusing to surrender came back, the people were even more angry and very dissatisfied with those barbarians who did not know what was good for them. This expedition was also considered to have won public opinion. not to mention the most important Xia state administrative department. Whether it was foreign negotiations or internal stability maintenance, the credit of the administrative department was indispensable. Not to mention that all military actions were actually supported by the national strength of Xia state, and the administrative department was an important department to ensure the growth of national strength. The military expenditure of the military department came from the tax revenue of Xia state. The tax revenue was collected by the finance and taxation department from all walks of life in Xia state and put into the national treasury, and the development of all walks of life was the credit of the administrative department. It is precisely because each department of Xia state performs its duties that Xia state is now strong and prosperous, and Yang Song can exert his power without any scruples and take Xia state to a new level. On the second day after the army set out, Yang Song was handling official business when he learned that Zun Yu, the director of the administration department, wanted to see him. "Your Majesty, I have something to report." After seeing Yang Song, Zun Yu bowed and told him the purpose of his visit. "No need to be polite. When are you? Oh, what do you want to say?" Yang Song put down the pen in his hand, looked at Zun Yu and said, "Just say it." "Yes, my king." Zun Yu bowed again, stood up and reported, "For our country, I suggest building a railway outside the pass, to the end of the vassal state." Yang Song frowned when he heard what Zun Yu said, and asked in confusion, "I don't know what Wen Ruo meant by this. What's the point of building a railway outside the pass?" Replying to the king, "Because of the railways crisscrossing our country, the north and the south are connected day and night, as if they were one place. Even if 1,000,000 troops are stationed in Shanhaiguan, there is no need for civilians to bear their logistics." Zun Yu replied, "If the army had the help of the railway this time, there would be no need for 100,000 militiamen to follow." How could Yang Song not know what Zun Yu said? If there were railways outside the pass, when the army went out this time, there would be no need to recruit 100,000 militiamen, and there would be no chance for the army to take action at all. The land outside the pass would have been directly under the jurisdiction of the Xia kingdom. However, the isolationism implemented by the Xia kingdom was to prevent more information from being transmitted to the outside world. How could such important things as railways and trains be revealed to the outside world? You have to know that, even if the county system, that is considered to be somewhat outdated for the Xia kingdom, is known by outsiders, it can trigger a series of wars, not to mention other more important information. It is estimated that by then, the people in this world will not only be as simple as the current small fights. When Ruo, hasn't it been decided long ago that the information of the Xia kingdom should not be revealed too much? Why now? Yang Song was even more confused after hearing this. He really didn't understand why Zun Yu suddenly came to suggest that he change the status quo. But now that Zun Yu made this suggestion at this time, he must have his considerations. After all, he knew what the decision of the Xia kingdom was for. Zun Yu bowed his hands and saluted. He did not answer Yang Song's question immediately, but asked in return, "I dare to ask if the king wants to rule after conquering foreign countries?" Yang Song heard Zun Yu's question, and finally knew why Zun Yu came to see him today. This was to make plans for what would happen after the victory. He also vaguely sensed that Zun Yu's intention today was more than that. According to Wen Ruo's meaning, what if I have an idea? What if I don't have an idea? Yang Song did not answer Zun Yu's question, but continued to ask him in return. As a king, he still had to take the initiative in speaking. If the king has no intention of ruling the large tracts of land outside the pass, after this victory, you can use a large number of vassal states to provide convenience for the development of your country. Zun Yu answered Yang Song's question about not wanting to rule the land outside the pass with a simple sentence. If the king is interested, then our country's policy of closing the country should be changed. Zun Yu said this, looked at Yang Song, and continued to speak. When Yang Song nodded to continue. There is no natural barrier outside Shanhaiguan to build a pass. If we want to rule, railways and other things will definitely enter the eyes of the barbarians. It is useless to hide it. It is better to open the borders and let the barbarians experience the strength of Xia. It is the best strategy to defeat the enemy without fighting. Yang Song did not immediately draw a conclusion to Zun Yu's words, but stood up, walked out of the door slowly while thinking, looking at the scenery of the back garden, and didn't know what he was thinking. Maybe for the administrative department, opening up Xia may gain greater benefits, but some things are not just about the immediate benefits. And Yang Song thought further. If the borders were opened, all aspects, including the thoughts of the people in the country and the linkage with the indigenous forces, would no longer be under Yang Song's control. At that time, no one could predict how the world would develop. This matter is too important. Let's discuss it after the army returns victoriously. Until the end, Yang Song did not make a decision. Just as he said, this matter is too important. It is better to wait until Lurk and others come back to discuss it. Anyway, the focus of Xia State is now on the expedition, and it is not a matter of time. Yes, my king, I obey your order. Seeing this, Xia also knew that he could not get any results now, so he said goodbye and left. Xia left, but Yang Song's heart was in chaos because of this. Before the army went out, Yang Song and Lurk and others agreed that Xia State should focus on development at home and training as a supplement to foreign affairs. Now Xia suddenly suggested that the status quo should be changed, which made Yang Song think further. Even if Xia State still develops according to the strategy in the future, what about the future? Can Xia State really never communicate with the outside world? Even if the natives of this world and the Xia people are two races that look similar, it is impossible for Xia State to sweep across the world immediately and kill all the natives of this world. Even if one side maintains a state of war, as the territory of Xia expands, as Xia said, Xia's information will sooner or later be exposed. At least things as conspicuous as railways and trains cannot be concealed. What should Xia do then? When the information from Xia hits the world, no one knows the full impact. However, Yang Song can still roughly guess part of the impact. Technology will definitely be valued, wars will become more frequent, and who knows how many kings and emperors will be there. Alas, maybe it's time. Yang Song sighed heavily, thinking about the distant future, and couldn't help but feel a little unconfident. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372, Invincible Fleet. Above the boundless ocean, the sky is clear and cloudless, while in the ocean, there are thousands of sails floating up and down. Li Bao stood at the bow of the super battleship, looking at the endless warships and ships around him, and he could not help but feel proud. He commanded such an invincible fleet, and felt that there was no place he could not go in the world. The Defense Fleet had the only super battleship in the entire fleet, and it was also the only one in Xia country. This super battleship was the flagship of the Defense Fleet, and the flagship of the sea expedition. It was Li Bao's ship. The super battleship was 75 meters long and 16 meters wide at its widest point. Its full load displacement reached a terrifying 5,700 tons, and its loaded weapons were not inferior to its terrifying displacement. There are 38 first-level naval guns with a caliber of 180mm and a weight of 3 tons. There are also 38 second-level naval guns with a caliber of 160mm and a weight of more than 2 tons. And finally, there are 33rd-level naval guns with a caliber of 140mm and a weight of nearly 2 tons. In order to give this giant ship a combat capability that matches its size, it is equipped with a first-level naval gun with an effective range of 1,200 meters, which is not available in other warships. The hull of this super battleship has a total of 7 floors, including 2 superstructures. The bottom 3 floors are the anti-sinking layer, the material storage layer, and the sailor living layer from bottom to top. The combat area is above. The 4th, 5th, and 1st superstructures are all artillery layers. The 4th floor is equipped with first-level naval guns, the 5th floor is equipped with second-level naval guns, and the lower layer of the superstructure is equipped with third-level naval guns. The top superstructure is the combat command and officer living layer. This design makes the center of this super battleship lower, because the heavier the guns, the more they are on the lower layer. If you add the powerful power provided by the 5 tall mainmasts, such a battleship alone is synonymous with invincibility. Anyway, Li Bao couldn't think of any rivals in this world. You have to know that this is just a sailing battleship, not the ironclad ship of the future, let alone the distant dreadnought. The full load displacement of 5,700 tons even exceeds the destroyer of the steam turbine era. In fact, the design concept of all the battleships of Zaya country is the same as this super battleship, including the battleships of the main fleet and the escort frigates. In this expedition, in addition to the supply ships and transport ships for transporting materials and soldiers, the exploration fleet and transport fleet dispatched by sea, a total of 36 large and small battleships. There was a fast battleship, 2 cruisers and 3 destroyers in the exploration fleet, a super battleship, 2 battleships, 3 fast battleships, 6 cruisers, 6 destroyers and 12 frigates in the defense fleet. This was all the naval power of the Zaya Kingdom. All of them participated in this expedition, not even one was left behind. No. If you insist, there were actually 3 old-fashioned destroyers used as training ships that were left in the naval port. These 3 old-fashioned destroyers were built by the Zaya Kingdom, based on the frigates, rewarded by the system before the system rewarded the battleship blueprints. After the full set of sailing warship designs was available, it was discovered that these 3 self-built ships had many problems, so they were used as training ships for recruits. In the early morning, the Golden Crow had not yet jumped out of the sea, but it was already bright above the sea. Li Bao walked out of the cabin, walked across a clean and spacious deck to the bow parapet, and looked north. Xiao Tao came up from the lower deck and saw Li Bao standing by the wall alone in a light robe. He walked over and saluted, saying, "Greetings, General. The sea breeze is a bit cold today. Please take care of yourself, General." Xiao Tao had always been with Li Bao, but after the navy was expanded, Li Bao recommended him to be the commander of the exploration fleet. He is now a general with the rank of Major General, and serves as Li Bao's deputy in this expedition. Li Bao waved his hand to show that it was okay. He turned back to look at Xiao Tao and saw that he was in military uniform. He thought he had been up for a long time, so he asked, "Xiao Tao, how long will it take to reach the first target?" "General, the fleet set out from Linhai port at noon yesterday. Now it is not far from the target of 300 kilometers from Linhai port." Xiao Tao calculated secretly and replied, "The fleet should reach the target sea by evening today." Because there was a transport fleet full of the 1st Regiment of the Imperial Guard, it dragged down the fleet. Therefore, even if the entire fleet sailed with the northward ocean current, it could only move forward at a speed of 5 knots per hour. Otherwise, with only 2 fleets of warships, the speed of up to 10 knots should have reached the target overseas this morning. But there is no eventuality. It is impossible for the warships to abandon the target, to protect and move forward alone, right? Moreover, although there are warships in the sea expedition, the real target is still the soldiers of the 1st Regiment of the Imperial Guards who are now vomiting on the transport ship. The warships can only help and provide firepower support from the other side. After all, there is no opponent to fight with it on the sea. Even if the natives have some primitive warships, when facing this invincible fleet, if they don't know what's good for them and don't run away, but rush up to attack, the result can be imagined with their toes. Therefore, the reason why Yang Song also counted the navy in this expedition is because of the training plan. The navy also needs to be trained training joint operations between sea and land. Even if escort and firepower support from the other side are not the main combat methods of the fleet, they are also an indispensable part of the military system. In the evening, the fleet arrived at the first target's outer sea on time. This is a seaside town, located in the north of the current Fulimid country. It is another city of a coalition force united by multiple lords, and it is also the residence of the lords of this force. There are countless territories in this world. Although the Zaya Kingdom has collected intelligence on each territory, there is no general who goes back to remember the names of these territories. However, for these cities near the sea that were selected by the Zaya Kingdom as targets, Li Bao and his men still patiently gave them separate names. The Zaya Kingdom's expeditionary fleet stopped at the sea 20 kilometers away from the target. As night fell, the reconnaissance ship sent in front of the fleet quickly sent back intelligence about the target. After receiving the intelligence, Xiao Tao reported to Li Bao as soon as possible. "General, the scout ship reported that Shaohei City was not prepared. Xiaohe City is the name given to the target by the Xia Kingdom, indicating that this is the first target of this expedition at sea. It is not known whether it is an honor or a misfortune. Anyway, no matter what, this city will definitely be remembered in history. Okay, got it. After Li Bao got the target and found it unprepared, he turned and walked into the room and ordered with his back to Xiao Tao, order the fleet to rest here tonight and launch the attack at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. It is not possible without rest. The 2nd Division, which has only been drifting on the sea for less than a few days, has little combat effectiveness at this time. After all, humans are land creatures. It is difficult to adapt to life on the sea without training, let alone the 2nd Division, which is forced to do so. Li Bao could not turn the fleet around, just for this difficulty at this time of war, but he still recorded this silently, and prepared to report the results of the training to Yang Song after the training was over. PS. Regarding the effective range of artillery, it has been updated after the reminder of readers, and the latest data is in the related works. Thank you for reminding my readers that some information is not collected in place. Sorry. Chapter 373 Sea City Waters. At 6 o'clock the next morning, after breakfast, the fleet entered combat mode, and the 1st Guards Regiment did the same, preparing for landing. The attack plan with Xiaohe City had already been agreed upon, and the 1st Guards Regiment would send all its forces to launch a beach landing after the fleet bombarded the city. Li Bao's flagship, the super battleship, numbered 01, was named Apocalypse. According to regulations, the names of super battleships were named after important citizens Xia State, and the names of battleships were named after county-level citizens Xia State. Because there were too many battleships of other levels, they had no names but only numbers. At 6:50, Xiao Tao came to Li Bao and reported, "General, the whole army is ready for battle. Please give the order." "Okay, got it." Li Bao looked up and saw that it was Xiao Tao. He gave a serious order and instructed, "Xiao Tao, start the attack. Remember, today is the first battle of my sea army. We must ensure a complete victory. Tell the brothers of the 1st Regiment that the fleet can provide them with artillery support at any time." "Yes, General." Xiao Tao knew that today's battle was of great significance. Without saying a word, he turned around and went out of the cabin to pass the order. Xiao Tao came out of the cabin and shouted to the messenger who had been waiting for a long time, "General has an order, start the attack." Then the order to start the attack was passed to each warship of the fleet, including the transport fleet behind. Suddenly, the fleet that was originally quietly anchored became lively. The fleet opened a gap, and warships and transport ships came out one by one, and then lined up in a neat queue and quickly sailed towards the target in the west. In fact, before the expedition, Li Bao had agreed with Zhao Wu that the battle on land would be commanded by the army itself, and the battle on sea would of course be decided by Li Bao. Just as Li Bao said, the battle on land must be commanded by the army. If the battle failed because of his excessive intervention, then his responsibility would be huge. Of course, the specific combat objectives still need to be determined by Li Bao, but the combat command of the specific battlefield is commanded by the officers of the 1st Regiment of the Imperial Guard. The battle on the sea is predictable. There is no fleet duel on the sea. Only the support from the other side and the escort of the army are the themes. This makes Li Bao feel a little unwilling, but there is no way. He can't change his opponent to fight the last one, and he can't let his navy abandon the warships and fight on land. Therefore, Li Bao can only think of change. He came to the familiar position of the bow and looked at the dozens of large and small transport ships under the protection of the warships. He thought maybe the navy should have its own marines. Although the target in front of them was the first target on the sea route, it was not necessary for the entire fleet to rush forward, so the 8,400 men of the 1st Regiment of the Imperial Guards were enough to deal with it, and the Navy only sent all the warships of the exploration fleet and the super battleship, where Li Bao was. At such an important moment, Li Bao certainly did not want to just wait patiently for the battle report from the front. So he would personally lead the Apocalypse to go out and leave the fleet in the rear to Xiao Tao. including the Apocalypse. Liu sent out 7 warships for the first battle, including the Apocalypse super battleship, the flagship of the exploration fleet, the fast battleship, the Linhai, as well as 2 cruisers and 3 destroyers. After only an hour of going out, the destroyer sailing in front found some fishing boats fishing near the coast, but ignored them, and the fleet went straight to the target. As for the fishing boats blocking the fleet's way, the fleet was not polite and did not use artillery, but just crushed them directly. There was no extra time and energy to waste on these small boats now. Even if the fishing boats ahead saw something wrong and wanted to avoid or escape, they were too slow. Except for a few lucky fishing boats, the rest were crushed to the bottom of the sea by the fleet. It was unknown whether the fish in the sea had ever thought that there would be a day when they would eat the predators on land. Report to the general. The enemy fleet was found outside the target. When the Tsar fleet arrived outside the target in an unstoppable manner, they found that the enemy was actually prepared. Haha, they are actually prepared. Order the warships to destroy the enemy fleet. After receiving the report, Liu picked up the telescope and looked outside the harbor in front of the target. Sure enough, he saw dozens of small boats in a state of alert. Looking at the enemy's fleet deployed outside the harbor, it was better to say that it was a larger fishing boat than a fleet, but it was just carrying soldiers. The warships of the Tsar fleet quickly turned their hulls sideways 500 meters in front of the enemy fleet, facing the enemy with the side of the warships, ready to fire, while the transport ships stopped a little further away, waiting for the order to land. The name called Shaohei City by Tsar Guo means someone's seaside city. There are countless names like this on this coast, which is why Tsar Guo named it by itself. Brady Cap is the owner of this city and the lord of the nearby territory. This morning, he was still sleeping soundly as usual, but was called out by his attendant anxiously. My lord, it's bad. A very powerful enemy is coming from the sea. Brady was very unhappy, but when he heard that an enemy attacked him from the sea, he woke up instantly. Brady sat up at once and asked hurriedly, enemy? On the sea? Are Xavier Buckler's people coming to rob again? My lord. The attendant quickly dressed Brady and replied, it's not from the north. The enemy came from the depths of the sea. I don't know where it came from. The reason why the attendant was sure that the ship must be an enemy was because he got the news that it was the deep sea. Brady heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that it was not his old enemy, but he was very confused when he heard that the enemy came from the deep sea, so he asked casually, what is the enemy like? My lord, I don't know. The attendant rushed to inform his lord after hearing the news of the enemy. He didn't see the rest of the situation with his own eyes, so how could he know? I don't know. Brady did not blame the attendant for not knowing, but walked out of the room with full of doubts and quickly came to the observation deck on the seaside of the castle. My god. What did he see? Brady couldn't believe his eyes and couldn't help rubbing his sleepy dark circles. Chapter 374, The Sorrow of Haicheng. Brady swallowed hard, watching the warships coming towards him quickly on the sea, gradually becoming clearer, and his sleepiness had long gone. He had never seen or even heard of the huge ships that were as big as mountains, especially the one among them. He didn't know how to describe it. The only word that came to his mind was big. But when he got closer, he saw the loggers of these warships, and Brady finally knew where these familiar warships came from. Quick, let this lord's warships go to sea, quick. Brady saw that all the station ships were flying the unique flag of Zaya country, and then remembered the notice given to him by the envoy of Zaya country some time ago. If he didn't know what was going on, he would be an idiot. He said why these warships looked so familiar. It turned out that the fleet of Zaya country had replenished supplies on his territory when it went north to explore a few years ago, but the fleet of Zaya country at that time was far less numerous and larger than what appeared in front of him now. In fact, without Brady's order, his knight commander immediately sent out warships to prepare for the enemy, so after the attendant reminded Brady, he finally relaxed a little. Just as Brady hypnotized himself that he could win, the Zaya fleet on the sea suddenly changed its action. The ship was horizontally placed a few hundred meters away from the defense line. What are you doing? When Brady saw that the Zaya fleet did not rush up directly to fight, but turned around in the distance, he was puzzled. A series of flames appeared at the position of the Tsar fleet, followed by a series of loud noises. Not good. Hide quickly. Brady saw this scene, and after knowing that the enemy was Tsar, he remembered the news from the south, that Tsar's weapons were able to emit flames and loud noises, and the range was very long and the power was also very powerful. There was no need for Li Bao's more detailed orders, or the orders had already been issued. The next second after the warship pointed its guns at the enemy, the captains of each warship issued orders to fire. Captain's order, fire. The chief gunner roared into the megaphone on the ship. In less than a second, the chief gunner's voice was transmitted to all parts of the warship through the megaphones that crisscrossed the battleship. After receiving the order, the chief gunners on each floor roared to the gunners under their jurisdiction without hesitation. All of them. Target, enemy ships. One salvo, fire. The sound of boom 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 spread from one end of the battleship to the other, and then repeated again, until all the guns of this battleship had finished firing and then stopped. The so-called salvo does not mean that all the guns on this side of the ship are fired at the same time. If they really fire at the same time, the powerful recoil of the guns may cause the battleship itself to fall apart. Therefore, the chief gunner's salvo order actually means firing in sequence, but the interval between each gun is very short, just like a salvo. In addition, only when firing in salvo can the power of the battleship be maximized. The same happened to the Apocalypse, where Li Bao was. Following the captain's order to fire, the first to roar were the guns on the bottom layer, which were half of the 38 first level guns. The 19 180mm first level guns began to emit flames from the bow, accompanied by thick smoke. The first level guns on the bottom layer roared at the enemy, which was only about 500 meters away. It took less than 10 seconds for the last first level gun at the stern to fire a shell. Then, in the thick smoke, the second level guns on the middle layer also fired shells, followed by the third level guns on the top layer. After all the guns on one side of the Apocalypse fired their own shells, even the thousands of tons of displacement of the Apocalypse were pushed back several meters by the recoil of the guns. The black solid shells dragged a light black smoke tail and quickly passed the short 500 meters, hitting the enemy fleet. Some unlucky small boats were directly hit, and they did not sink immediately, but suffered a huge blow. Some were even less fortunate, being hit directly by multiple shells, and falling apart in an instant. But more often, the shells did not directly hit the enemy units, but smashed into the sea, stirring up streams of water. After the 7 warships finished a round of bombardment, Li Bao took advantage of the time for the warships to reload, and looked through the telescope in his hand, that he had not put down, since the start of the war, and found that the results of the first round of bombardment were still good, and even completely met his expectations. Li Bao looked at the target harbor, and found that there were also several plumes of smoke and dust rising in the harbor farther away. It should be that some of the guns of the warships were raised a few points, allowing the shells to fly to the land 1 kilometer away. The 7 warships of Tsar State fired a round of bombardment, a total of 156 solid shells, which caused decisive damage to the enemy. The enemy's warship fleet, which was still neat before the war, was now in pieces, and the few survivors were now panicking and fleeing to the harbor. The rest all turned into pieces of duckweed on the sea. After a small wave from time to time, they sank and disappeared. Perhaps there was something heavy on them, dragging the unsinkable wood to the bottom of the sea. I don't know how the enemy felt about the attack of the Tsar warships. It must be very uncomfortable. Anyway, when the fleet arrived, there was a commotion in the enemy's fleet. As for after the attack, it is unknown whether there was any feeling. Li Bao saw that there was no need to let the warships launch a second round of attack, so he gave an order, let the transport ship behind dock. Yan Ren was also watching from the side. He did not say anything about Li Bao's order, which meant that he agreed with Li Bao's landing order. Wait. However, when the messenger took the order and turned to pass on the message, Li Bao hurriedly ordered, please tell the soldiers of the 1st Regiment, I look forward to their heroic performance. As the messenger took the order and left, not long after, dozens of transport ships parked in the rear, fully loaded with soldiers of a regiment and all their weapons and equipment, lifted the anchors, raised the sails, and launched the last distance charge towards the target. Li Bao saw the transport ships in the rear sprinting, looked at Xiao Heicheng, and order the warships to move forward and carry out ground attacks. Pay special attention to the places where the enemy soldiers are densely concentrated. Following Li Bao's order, the 7 warships moved forward again, all the way to the harbor, and stopped when they were about to dock, using their powerful artillery to attack the enemy troops close at hand. For the ground attack, the ship guns were loaded with shrapnel shells. Li Bao did not want to destroy this harbor and leave the transport ships behind with no place to dock. Boom boom boom. The occasional explosions and the stumps that occasionally rose up made the still panicked enemy even more panicked. How could they have the courage to fight? They didn't even have time to escape. With the Dang, a small transport ship landed, or more precisely, it landed on the dock of the seaport. A group of soldiers rushed out from it at the first time and cleaned up the remaining enemies on the dock, who were running slowly. For a while, in the sound of artillery explosions, another sound appeared, the sound of papa muskets. It was like a symphony of war, fiercely and freely performed in this seaport and sea city. Chapter 375, The Fall of Heicheng. Then, a continuous stream of large and small transport ships docked at the dock one after another until the docking limit was reached. Half of the transport ships at the back could not dock. There was no way, because there were too many ships and the harbor was too small. The transport ships in front had to speed up their work so that they could leave the dock and let the transport ships waiting behind dock. Fortunately, the dock and even the entire harbor were under the firm control of the 1st Regiment of the Imperial Guards at this time, so there was enough time for the soldiers behind to slowly land. The port of this sea city was still too small and could not accommodate too many ships at one time. Li Bao could only sigh and express his helplessness. If it was a coastal battle without a dock or a port, the transport ships would not dock directly like this, but would drop landing boats in the near sea, and these commuter boats would carry soldiers ashore. Although the commuter boats could dock regardless of the terrain, a boat could only carry a dozen people at most at a time, which was far less fast than the direct landing like now. All soldiers of the 1st Regiment of the Imperial Guards landed within 2 hours and launched an attack on Shaohei City. Even the team that landed later found that there was no target to attack after landing, so they could only repair on the spot and serve as a rear guard. This seaport was originally part of Shaohei City, which means that when the soldiers of the Xia Kingdom landed, they had already attacked Shaohei City, avoided the city walls, and started street fighting directly. It is not to say that there are no defensive measures outside this seaport, but the fence that only blocked pedestrians was not much different from no defense in the face of the attack of the Xia Kingdom. At about 11 o'clock in the afternoon, the Xia Kingdom army attacked outside the castle with great momentum and launched an attack on it at the first time. If it were not for consolidating the occupied area and gathering troops, it would not take so long to attack the position of the castle in the city. The castle of Shaohei City was built on a hillside in the city, overlooking the entire city from a high position. Such a conspicuous target made the gunners of the warships unable to help but launch a bombardment on it. So when the army soldiers arrived outside the castle, they found that the castle had already become tattered and did not play its intended role at all, defending against foreign enemies. The biggest obstacle for the soldiers when they attacked the castle was not the resistance of the castle guards, but the ruins all over the ground. The rubble and falling rocks greatly hindered the passage of the soldiers, so that the soldiers had to clear a passage before they could launch the attack. Report to the general. The battle report from the battlefield came again. The front line reported that the city has been captured and no enemy leader was found. The front judged that the enemy leader should have escaped. Li Bao received this report and said to himself, this city has been captured. The escape of the enemy lord was within his expectations. Although he had launched an attack on him as soon as possible, it was not a siege after all. Li Bao also knew how difficult it was to capture the enemy leader in the chaos. Li Bao did not say anything and directly order the entire army to clean up the battlefield, repair the city defense, and let the ships behind come over and release all the army. According to the meaning of Li Bao's order, it was clear that he was preparing to use this city as a stronghold. Li Bao finally instructed his subordinates, let the brothers of the 1st Regiment rest in this city tonight. At night, the entire Xiaohe city was completely transformed into a large barracks. The indigenous residents who originally lived in the city were completely expelled for safety and confidentiality. The ships anchored in the harbor have filled the entire port, most of which are transport ships, but the warships did not enter the port to dock, but patrolled and guarded outside. Because the harbor is very dangerous at this time, there are still hundreds of large and small transport ships crowded together without any defense. If you are not careful, a fire can ignite a large area. Sully Bayo arranged the naval fleet outside to prevent the non-existent event. After Brady shouted hide quickly, he leaned over and hid under the wall. Until the sound of the cannon passed, he did not feel the expected attack. When he looked out of the sea in confusion, he found that his originally neat fleet had disappeared. This shocked Brady. No matter how well prepared he was, when he saw with his own eyes that his army at sea was so vulnerable, he realized that the fleet of Xia Kingdom's giant ships not only looked magnificent, but also had extremely strong actual combat power. Then Brady saw with his own eyes that the city he was proud of was trembling under the enemy's attack. Finally, he saw that the big ship behind Xia Kingdom, which had not moved, began to rush up quickly, and a group of soldiers rushed out from it. At this time, Brady knew that this city could not be defended, and he had to think of a way out. Outside the castle, artillery fire roared, and Brady walked back and forth in the room alone, thinking about his way out. He said to himself, why not surrender? After saying this, Brady immediately shook his head repeatedly. Even if he had not rejected Xia Kingdom before, he would not dare to surrender. You must know that the lords of the territories conquered by Xia Kingdom in the past all had no good end, not to mention that he had stubbornly resisted Xia Kingdom. It seems that the only way is to run away. Since there is no way to surrender, the only way is to run away. After all, they can't win the fight, and if they don't run away, they will only wait for death. Brady made up his mind and immediately shouted to the outside of the door, someone, come quickly. The servant came in and waited for his orders. Brady ordered anxiously and quickly, go and ask the lady and the young lady to pack up, arrange a carriage, and follow this lord out of the city. Yes, sir, I'll go right away. The battle in the city made the servant anxious. Now when he heard that the lord was going to run away, he suddenly felt happy and hurriedly ran out of the door. Wait. When the attendant was about to leave, Brady thought of the powerful attack of the Xia army, so he stopped the attendant and ordered the knight commander to lead the soldiers and civilians of the city to defend the city. Don't make any mistakes. Do you know what to do? The attendant heard Brady's order, which was to ask the knight commander to lead the soldiers and civilians of the city to delay time for his escape, but the attendant turned his head and thought, since he was going to run with the lord now, why bother about him so much? So he did it neatly. Brady escaped from the city smoothly, but the soldiers and civilians in the city suffered. Although Brady's knight commander loyally followed the order and stubbornly defended the city, he couldn't win the fight, and the strength comparison between the two sides would not change because of his thoughts. Brady had not run far after escaping from the city when he learned from the residents who escaped from the city behind that the whole city had been lost, so he ran faster. It was not until the afternoon that Brady got the news that the Xia army had only driven out everyone in the city and did not send troops to pursue, so he slowed down. In the end, no one knew what Brady was thinking. Perhaps he was still unwilling to give up. He led a team of guards to a hillside where he could see the entire Xiaohe city from afar. But when he looked over from afar, he found that at some point, the harbor was already full of large ships. The number was not the number he saw in the castle this morning. Looking at the densely packed large ships of the Xia Kingdom, that could not even be seen at the end, Brady immediately collapsed on the ground, staring at the harbor in the distance with lifeless eyes, because he knew that he might never be able to go back again. In the morning's attack, the military force dispatched by the Xia Kingdom was only a small part of its total. If all the troops were dispatched together, Brady didn't even dare to think about it. What kind of scene would that be? End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.